The words hit me like a freight train, their impact sending shockwaves through my body. I froze, my hand still clutching the coffee mug, knuckles turning white. Massive fraud scandal, implicated Hughes. My ears rang as I strained to make out the hushed conversation between the two surgeons huddled nearby. Hughes. Garrett Hughes, my estranged husband. Fragments of their discussion pierced through the din of the crowded conference hall lobby. Criminal charges, federal investigation, millions lost. I squeezed my eyes shut, desperately wishing it were all a cruel misunderstanding. But deep down, a gnawing sense of truth clawed at my gut. Garrett had always been cavalier with ethics, bending rules to feed his insatiable ambition as a high-flying financial analyst. I'd turned a blind eye for too long, rationalizing his moral lapses as the cost of success, until they finally shattered our marriage beyond repair. My hands trembled as I gathered my things, the pieces slowly clicking into place. The constant business trips, the hushed phone calls, the blatant lies, they all reeked of guilt and deception now. As I hurried out, dodging clusters of colleagues, fury blazed within me. How could he? After everything, did he have no conscience? No thought for the consequences? For Elise? The thought of my 16-year-old daughter stopped me in my tracks. Sweet, innocent Elise, already grappling with the pressures of teenage life. This would devastate her. I clenched my fists, resolve steadying my nerves. Not this time, Garrett. I wouldn't let you inflict more pain on our family. My heels struck the pavement with newfound purpose as I stormed out of the hotel. I had to get to the bottom of this, for Elise's sake. And God help Garrett Hughes if the whispers proved true. I burst through the door of our upscale apartment, chest heaving. Garrett looked up from the sofa, his expression a portrait of nonchalance that I'd grown to despise. Lena, I didn't expect you back so. Cut the crap, Garrett, I snarled, thunder in my voice. What the hell have you done? His brows knitted in confusion. What are you talking about? The fraud scheme. I closed the distance between us, stabbing an accusatory finger into his chest. All those hushed meetings and shady dealings. I heard everything at the conference. His mask finally shattered, dread hollowing his eyes. Who told you? I recoiled, repulsed. So it's true? You lying, depraved bastard. Garrett's complexion turned ashen. Lena, please, let me explain. But I was done listening to his lies. Explain what? How you risked our lives, our daughter's future with your crooked greed? Drawing myself up, I met his pathetic gaze with steel. You're going to come clean, Garrett. To the authorities, to our daughter, to everyone. I won't let you put us through hell again. Jaw clenched, I turned on my heel and strode out, each step fortifying my resolve. The monster of deception I'd unknowingly married was unraveling, and this time I would be the one delivering justice. I stormed back into the apartment, slamming the door behind me. Garrett was slumped on the sofa, head in his hands. He looked up at the sound, eyes bloodshot. You're back, he croaked out. Don't act so surprised, I spat. Did you really think I'd just slink away after your despicable betrayal? Garrett rose warily. Lena, please, you have no idea what I've been going through. My hands balled into fists. Oh, I think I have a damn good idea, thanks to those whispers at the conference. I never meant to. He trailed off, rubbing his temples. Things just spiraled so quickly. My temper flared. You think that's an excuse? What for I'm going to say next? You got caught up in the thrill of deception? An uneasy silence stretched between us, thick with lingering resentment. Finally he spoke in a hoarse whisper. They're ruined, Lena. All my clients, my reputation. He met my glare with a haunted look. I'm facing financial oblivion and possibly criminal charges. In that moment, a part of me almost pitied him, the shadow of the confident, silver-tongued man I'd once loved, now reduced to this desperate husk. Almost. I stepped closer, voice dripping with venom. That's nowhere near the hell you've put our daughter and me through. Hurt flickered across his face, rapidly engulfed by shame. Good. He deserved to drown in it. My mind raced back to that night years ago, the fateful argument that shattered our marriage vows. Uncovered lies about money, infidelity, broken promises. I'd wept until I could cry no more. And through it all, Garrett remained coldly indifferent, consumed by greed and carnal desires. That night, I vowed our daughter Elise would never have to suffer the anguish I did over her father's moral failings. But now here I stood, the old wounds reopened and bleeding anew, White-hot rage roiled in my chest like lava. "When were you planning to tell me, Garrett? Or Elise?" I hissed through gritted teeth. He grimaced like a cornered rat. I don't know. I thought I could fix this before." My palm whipped across his cheek with a resounding crack. Garrett reeled back, stunned. "Don't you dare invoke our daughter's name with your wretched lies," I snarled. "Not after you jeopardized everything we have, everything I sacrificed my career for." I loomed over him, trembling with fury. "She worships you, Garrett. How could you put her through such anguish again?" Shame and guilt contorted his features, but I felt no sympathy, just disgust at his moral cowardice. He was the personification of every fear that kept me up at night, dreading the day his deceit resurfaced to torment our little girl. Suddenly, Garrett seemed to crumple under my withering glare. I watched him passively as he sank onto the couch, burying his face in his hands, shoulders heaving. I stood rooted for a long moment, then turned and strode out without a backwards glance. The first tears streamed down my cheeks as the magnitude of his latest betrayal hit home. I would protect Elise, no matter what inner demons I had to confront from our shattered past. I found Elise hunched over her laptop at the kitchen counter, fingers furiously tapping away. Her brow furrowed in concentration as she navigated the storm of teenage life. "Hi, honey," I said gently, not wanting to startle her. "Everything okay?" Elise looked up with a weary smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Hey, Mom. Yeah, just working on this stupid group project." I winced inwardly at her haggard expression, the telltale signs of adolescent stress etched into her young features. If only I could shield her from such burdens. Fighting the urge to pull her into a warm embrace, I gestured to the laptop screen. "What's the project about?" "Environmental science," she sighed, rubbing her temples. "We're analyzing the ecological impacts of commercial farming, but my partners keep blowing off meetings and missing deadlines." My heart ached to see her so overwhelmed. Elise had always been a diligent student, meticulously completing assignments well before they were due. But these past few months, the workload seemed to be taking a heavy toll. "I'm so sorry, Elle. That's really unfair to you." She shrugged listlessly. "It's whatever. I'm used to carrying the load at this point." Those words cut deep, a brutal reminder that once again I'd failed to protect her from unnecessary hardship. Just like that night years ago when she overheard Garrett and I screaming at each other. Swallowing hard, I forced a reassuring smile. "Why don't you take a break? We could watch a movie. Just the two of us." Elise hesitated, chewing her lip in that adorably pensive way she had since childhood. Finally, she spoke in a small voice that shattered my heart anew. Have you noticed people have been treating me differently lately?" My breath caught in my throat as she continued. "It's like they go out of their way to exclude me, whispering behind my back." She hugged her arms, suddenly looking so small and vulnerable. Did I do something wrong, Mom?" White-hot anger flared within me, aimed directly at the monstrous coward who'd brought such misery into our lives. I wanted nothing more than to rush over and enfold Elise in my arms, shielding her from this fresh betrayal. But I knew I couldn't. Not yet. Couldn't risk tainting her innocence before I fully grasped the serpentine depths of her father's transgressions. Suppressing my rage, I crossed over and placed my hands on her slender shoulders. "Listen to me, Elise," I said firmly. "You are the most kind-hearted, brilliant young woman I know, and anyone who treats you with anything less than respect doesn't deserve a second of your time or energy." She gazed up at me with those soulful eyes, silently pleading for reassurance and guidance. In that moment, I yearned to lay bare the sordid truth haunting our family once more. But I held my tongue, forcing a warm smile instead. "Trust me, honey, you haven't done anything wrong. Those people are just small-minded and intimidated by your spirit." I gently brushed a tendril of hair from her face. Bullies always lash out at the strong, the special ones who shine too brightly. Slowly, the tension drained from Elise's posture, her eyes regaining a spark of their familiar radiant self. "Thanks, Mom," she murmured, managing a small smile. I really needed to hear that." As she turned back to her work, I could no longer suppress the storm of conflicted emotions roiling within. Garrett would be made to answer for every one of Elise's tears, every shred of hardship he'd callously inflicted. My titanic quest for justice had only just begun. The next morning, I strode into my office at Mercy General with a renewed sense of purpose burning in my chest. I had to get to the bottom of Garrett's tangled web before it collapsed on our family. Sinking into my desk chair, I pulled up his name on my computer, grimly scanning the search results. Article after damning article detailed a shocking saga of fraud, deception, and shattered lives. Multi-million-dollar Ponzi scheme, offshore accounts, disgraced hedge fund manager. My stomach twisted as I read about investors and retirees left destitute, life savings siphoned away by Garrett's unquenchable greed. How could he have been so heartlessly reckless, so morally bankrupt? One particularly lurid piece caught my eye. An exposé from a local paper written by a journalist named Alexis Harmon. I vaguely recalled her as an up-and-coming reporter known for her uncompromising pursuit of the truth. Perhaps she could help unravel this sordid tangle. I quickly jotted down her contact details, resolving to reach out shortly. But first, one other avenue required exploring. I leaned back, worrying my lower lip as I typed out a familiar name, Malcolm Brooks. One of Garrett's closest colleagues during his heyday on Wall Street, Brooks had been disgraced a few years back in an insider trading scandal. He and Garrett had been thick as thieves until Brooks landed in prison while Garrett escaped culpability through dumb luck and clever maneuvering. If anyone had insight into the depravity Garrett was capable of, it was Malcolm. A short while later, my phone buzzed with a New York area code. Taking a steadying breath, I accepted the call. Malcolm Brooks speaking. Mr. Brooks, I said evenly. This is Lena Barkley, Garrett Hughes' wife. A momentary silence crackled over the line before he responded, surprise tinging his gruff tone. Well, isn't this a blast from the past? To what do I owe the pleasure, Mrs. Barkley? I paused, weighing my words carefully. I think you know exactly why I'm calling. Another beat of silence before a low, bitter chuckle. So you finally caught a glimpse of that worm's true colors, did you? Can't say I'm surprised. Garrett Hughes was always 2 shakes away from an ethical freefall. My breath caught in my throat at his venom-laced words, the pieces falling into sickening clarity. All those years ago, beneath my willful ignorance, I must have sensed Garrett's capacity for such monumental betrayal. That's what poisoned our relationship, our family, from the very start. I swallowed hard against the lump of guilt burning in my throat. Mr. Brooks, I need your help to undo the damage he's caused, for my daughter's sake. Walk me through everything you know. He made a low, scoffing noise. Of course, wouldn't want little Garrett Jr. growing up with Daddy's stench all over her. His cruel words lanced straight through me like jagged shards of ice, but I gritted my teeth, forcing my voice to remain steady. Please, Malcolm, I understand if you hate Garrett, but don't take that out on my child. She's completely innocent in all this. A tense pause stretched between us before he finally sighed, relenting. You're right. I apologize, Ty. That was uncalled for. I leaned forward, clutching the phone tightly. So you'll help me bring him down before anyone else gets hurt? Another weighted pause before he muttered. Yeah, I'll help you burn that snake straight to the ground. Spine ramrod straight, I listened with cold determination as Malcolm laid bare the full, sickening scope of Garrett's depravity. Breached ethics, illegal trades, hollowed out companies, and ruined lives littering his path like grisly roadkill. A white-hot mixture of rage, disgust, and bone-deep determination blazed within me by the time he finished. Garrett had hurt so many people, stolen their futures and sense of security through cold, calculated avarice. But I would be damned if he stole those things from Elise and me again. No more lies, no more running, no more hollow excuses. The time for my husband's reckoning had finally come. And I would be standing watch, clear-eyed and uncompromising when the hammer fell. You can't be serious, Mom. Elise gaped at me, eyes wide with a mixture of shock and hurt. I steeled myself, fighting to keep my expression neutral. I'm afraid I am, honey. I reached across the kitchen table, gently grasping her hand. This is the only way to stop your father from inflicting more damage. She yanked her hand back, shaking her head vehemently. But going public like that? Dragging his name through the mud? He did this to himself, Elise. I fought to keep my voice steady against the growing tide of anguish welling within me. Your father's greed and selfishness put us in this position, not me. Elise shot up from her chair, whirling away with her arms hugged tightly across her chest, the universal gesture of wounded vulnerability. You always saw the worst in him, even when he was trying his best. Maybe that's why he felt like he couldn't come to us. The accusations sliced deep, dredging up years of unresolved guilt over the disintegration of our family unit. My fists clenched at my sides as I struggled against the urge to snap back in volatile defensiveness. This wasn't about me and Garrett. It was about protecting our daughter from being collateral damage in his crusade of lies. Drawing a steadying breath, I rose and crossed over to where she stood, trembling with her back towards me. "Elise, look at me." I pitched my voice in that soft maternal tone that never failed to soothe her troubles as a child. "You need to understand how dangerously far your father has gone this time." Slowly, achingly, she turned to face me, eyes glistening, lip quivering in a valiant struggle to maintain her composure. "All those people he's hurt, the lives he's ruined." I fought against the lump swelling in my own throat. "If I don't stop him now, we could lose everything. Our home, your college fund, my practice, everything we've worked so hard to build." A lone teardrop traced down Elise's porcelain cheek as the gravity of my words sank in. Wordlessly, I pulled her into a fierce embrace, cradling her head against my chest while she shuddered with muffled sobs. We stayed like that for countless moments, mother and daughter united against the maelstrom threatening to rip our family asunder once more. At last, Elise drew back, sniffling as she swiped at her damp cheeks. Her eyes still shone with unspeakable hurt, but now reflected a glimmer of dawning resolution. "Okay," she said in a small but steady voice. "If this is the only way to make Dad face the truth, I'm in." A fragile sense of hope bloomed in my chest, quickly tempered by lingering dread. "I wish there was another way, Elise. Truly I do. But your father crossed a line this time that can't be ignored or undone." Marshalling my own inner reserves of courage, I drew myself up to my full height. "We're going to work closely with my contacts, a tenacious reporter and one of your father's most embittered former colleagues. Together, we're going to systematically unravel and expose every sordid thread of his fraud to the public." Elise's expression hardened with grim determination, aging her well beyond her 16 years. "Then let's get to work on bringing Dad's crimes to light," she said in a steely tone that would have made me proud under any other circumstances. "No more lies. No more protecting the Garrett Hughes everyone thinks they know." She extended her hand in a symbolic gesture of familial solidarity. It's time he faced the consequences for who he really is. Our eyes locked, two affronted warriors bound by unbreakable blood and shared betrayal, vowing to settle an overdue personal reckoning. Squaring my shoulders, I grasped her hand in an unbreakable filial vice. Agreed. It's finally time for the world to meet the real Garrett Hughes. And on that fateful day, the wheels of my husband's inevitable downfall were finally set into irreversible motion. The rhythmic tapping of my foot matched the pounding of my pulse as I sat tensely watching the clock. Any minute now, Alexis Harmon's blistering expose on Garrett's crimes would go live on the Hartford Chronicle's website. Elise shifted next to me on the sofa, her own restless energy bleeding through. A myriad of emotions flickered across her face: anger, sadness, trepidation. My heart ached to see the loss of her youthful innocence playing out so vividly. Squeezing her hand, I gave what I hoped was a reassuring smile. "It's going to be okay, honey?" She managed a wan nod, lips pressed into a grim line. Her phone buzzed, and she quickly silenced it, no doubt responding to yet another concerned message from a friend who'd inevitably seen the firestorm brewing on social media. Suddenly, my own phone rang, the call I'd been bracing for. Drawing a fortifying breath, I accepted and brought it to my ear. "It's done." Alexis Harmon's crisp voice sounded tinny but resolute. "The article just went live, complete with that paper trail from your source detailing every sordid dime Garrett pocketed illegally over the years." "Thank you, Alexis," I said, squeezing Elise's hand tighter. "You have no idea how much this means to us." "Don't thank me yet," she replied grimly. "This is just the opening salvo. Brace yourselves. Garrett's world is about to go nuclear." No sooner had she spoken than my laptop pinged with a new email notification. The subject line alone was enough to drain my face of all remaining color. Disgraced money manager Garrett Hughes orchestrated a $120 million Ponzi scheme. I drew a shuddering breath as the damning article's contents filled the screen. A masterfully crafted tapestry of cold, irrefutable facts meticulously unraveling my husband's litany of securities fraud, embezzlement, and brazen deception. Elise peered over, hand flying to muffle a horrified gasp as she digested the sheer enormity of Garrett's treachery. Of how his unchecked avarice had defrauded innocent pensioners of their life savings and irreparably shattered the finances of countless households, all while he lived in unrepentant opulence, utterly devoid of conscience. "Oh, my God," she choked out, hot tears spilling down her cheeks. "All those people, how could he?" My own grief and revulsion warred with a perverse sense of grim vindication. For far too long, Garrett's fortress of lies had tainted and contaminated those he claimed to love most. Now, at long last, the floodgates had finally burst open, a searing light shining upon the bottomless pit of deceit and moral bankruptcy he'd chosen to wallow in. Clutching my daughter's trembling form, I could only watch numbly as the first furious reactions began rolling in. Outraged tweets and Facebook rants from defrauded victims and scandalized observers alike. One particularly visceral comment seared itself into my memory. "Garrett Hughes is a vile, avaricious monster who deserves to rot in jail for the rest of his miserable life." Far from objecting, I found myself silently agreeing. How could I not, after laying my eyes upon the full, grotesque tapestry of my husband's perfidy? The shattered futures, ruined families, and trail of lives callously discarded in his rapacious wake. For so long, I deluded myself into believing I could redeem the shadowed remnants of the man I once loved. That faint glimmers of decency still resided within Garrett's withered soul. But confronted with such nightmarish evidence of his depravity, I realized I'd been clinging to a fantasy, a desperate mirage of the husband and father he should have been. The truth was more brutal, more horrifically absolute. Garrett Hughes was a pathological con man without a shred of empathy or remorse, and he needed to be stopped before his poison seeped into any more innocent lives. The reckoning was nigh. As the first bombshell detonated across the mediascape, I could only steel my resolve for the seismic upheavals still to come. No more turning away, no more deluding myself about second chances, only hard truths and the personal justice I'd fought so hard to deliver. The pounding on the front door echoed through the apartment like a judge's gavel. Elise and I exchanged a loaded glance, her eyes still rimmed with red from the night's endless tears. "Stay here," I murmured, rising to my feet on legs that trembled ever so slightly. With a fortifying breath, I crossed over and pulled open the door. Two grim-faced U.S. Marshals stood on the other side, badges glinting in the dim hallway light. "Mrs. Lena Barkley?" the taller one asked in a flat, no-nonsense tone. I lifted my chin, anger and vindication warring within me. "That's me. I assume you're here about my husband, Garrett Hughes?" "We have a federal warrant for his arrest," the second marshal stated, brandishing a sheaf of papers. "Our sources indicate he was last seen at this residence. Where is he?" An icy chill lanced through me, not of fear, but of sheer disgust that Garrett would potentially use our home as a refuge after his sickening criminal acts were laid bare. Grinding my teeth, I jerked my head towards the hallway. "See for yourselves." The two men brushed past me, fanning out with practiced efficiency. One whistled sharply as they entered the living area, his partner quickly taking up a defensive stance. "Target sighted." I followed their gaze to the corner of the room, and felt a swell of revulsion crest within me. There sat the disgraced shadow of my husband, slumped against the wall in his silk bathrobe and stained undershirt, an open bottle of gin clutched in his trembling hands. Garrett squinted blearily up at the approaching marshals, a pathetic, disheveled mockery of the suave, confident operator he'd once fancied himself. As they hauled him to his feet, the unmistakable reek of sour booze and failure assaulted my nostrils. "Garrett William Hughes," the first marshal barked, slapping cuffs around his limp wrists. "You are under arrest for securities fraud, embezzlement, and grand larceny charges. You have the right to remain silent." Elise emerged from the hallway, eyes blazing with equal parts loathing and raw hurt as she took in her fallen father's pathetic state. "Mom," she whispered from the corner of her mouth, sounding almost childlike. "Was this really necessary, parading him out like some common criminal?" Another wave of anger swelled in my breast, this one tinged with protectiveness over my daughter's lingering innocence. With 3 long strides, I crossed over to stand mere inches from Garrett's sagging, swaying form. "Look at her," I spat, jabbing a finger towards Elise's stricken face. "Look at the anguish you've put this beautiful girl through, you selfish bastard." His head lolled up, bloodshot eyes struggling to focus on our enraged features. "Lilina? Elise? I?" "Save it, Garrett," I snarled, revolted by his meager attempt at drunken contrition. "We don't want to hear any more of your lies." Elise stepped forward then, every ounce of her petite frame radiating white-hot fury. "Do you have any idea how many people's lives you destroyed, all for a bigger penthouse and sports cars?" Her voice dripped with caustic venom. "You're a pathetically greedy, soulless husk of a human being." Garrett recoiled as if struck, the haze of inebriation doing nothing to mask the spasm of naked shame contorting his features. But it wasn't remotely enough to temper the flames of disgust consuming me from the inside out. "You're right, Elise," I seethed, unable to tear my disgusted glare from his slack, pitiful visage. "He doesn't deserve a single ounce more of our anguish or tears." Straightening my spine, I fixed him with eyes of purest ice. "Take him away, officers, and if I never have to lay eyes on this wretched, morally bankrupt husk again, it'll be too soon." Yet as the marshals wrestled the handcuffed Garrett towards the door, our splintered family's legacy of generational trauma festered in the air between us, like an open wound. Gathering Elise into a protective embrace, I watched with a heady swirl of sadness, rage, and grim resolve as my husband was hauled away towards the harsh judgment he'd so ruthlessly courted. There would be no more lies, no more hollow platitudes, or desperate 11th-hour appeals for forgiveness. Only the cold and bitter fruit born of his voracious avarice. As the door swung shut behind Garrett Hughes, severing him from our lives forever, a solitary thought echoed through my mind. Justice, long overdue, had finally been served. 6 months later. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen window, bathing the room in a warm, rejuvenating glow. I sipped my coffee, savoring the rich aroma and tranquil silence. So much had changed, yet it felt like lifting a crushing weight from my shoulders. The financial fallout from Garrett's crimes had been severe. Between the court-ordered restitutions and legal fees, our prosperous lifestyle quickly became a memory. But I didn't lament its passing, not when I finally felt liberated from his toxic legacy. Elise's footsteps padded into the kitchen, shattering the fragile quiet. Her eyes were puffy from another night of processing the seismic shifts in our lives. But a small, peaceful smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. "Morning, Mom." I returned the smile, chest swelling with maternal pride. "Good morning, sweetheart." Gesturing to the stack of college brochures scattered across the table, I arched an eyebrow. "Anything catching your eye?" Elise sank into the chair opposite me, worrying her lower lip in that familiar pensive way. "A few possibilities. The scholarship money definitely helps expand my options." My heart clenched, guilt rapidly dousing the warm glow. If not for Garrett's catastrophic greed, Elise's application process wouldn't be weighed down by such pragmatism. "Honey, I'm so sorry you even have to worry about." "Stop," she cut me off firmly, that fierce spark shining through once more. "What's done is done, remember? We're not going to keep torturing ourselves over Dad's mistakes." I blinked, caught off guard by her adamant maturity. When had my little girl grown into such a resilient, self-possessed young woman? Reaching across the table, I gave her hand an affectionate squeeze. "You're right. We've finally exorcised that demon from our lives. No more looking back." Elise squeezed back, her warm smile broadening. "Exactly. We've got a fresh start ahead. Just you and me, Mom. Like it's always been." My breath hitched at the swell of emotions rushing through me. She was right. Through all the tumult and betrayal, our bond had remained unbreakable, an indomitable constant. No matter how deeply Garrett's deceit had burrowed, he could never extinguish the profound, unconditional love between a mother and her daughter. Nodding fiercely, I blinked back nascent tears of gratitude and release. "You and me against the world, kiddo. Always and forever." Elise's radiant smile was all the assurance I needed that we'd persevere, stronger, wiser, and steeled against any future maelstroms life might hurl our way. Because that unshakable foundation of love and trust was one pillar Garrett Hughes could never hope to crumble, no matter how greedily he indulged his worst impulses. With a contented sigh, I rose and began gathering our dishes, basking in the tender domestic ritual. The path ahead was rife with challenges, to be sure, but also brimming with possibilities neither of us could scarcely imagine yet. One thing was certain: the shackles of lies and moral cowardice had finally been shattered. Elise and I were free to author our own story on our own unbending terms. A sudden notification from my laptop caught my eye. I moved over and felt my eyebrows climb as the latest breaking news headline flashed across the screen. Disgraced money manager Garrett Hughes sentenced to 25 years in federal prison for orchestrating $120 million Ponzi scheme. A heaviness seemed to lift from my very soul as the words sank in. At long last, the ultimate cosmic arbitration had been delivered. Garrett's insidious misdeeds would no longer corrupt and metastasize in the shadows. He alone would answer for the countless lives he'd callously upended in pursuit of ill-gotten fortunes. Poetic justice, whether he was spiritually capable of appreciating it or not. Elise peered over my shoulder at the screen, her unburdened expression hardening into one of cool stoicism. Without a word, she reached past me and emphatically closed the laptop, shutting out her father's sins like a swiftly banished ghost. Our eyes met, shining with mutual catharsis. Betrayal and trauma had bent but not broken us. If anything, the lacerating trials had galvanized our resilience into an indestructible foundation to build anew. As a fresh wave of morning sunlight washed over us, I made a silent vow to ensure the remaining years of Elise's childhood would be swaddled in unconditional warmth, wisdom, and renewed family bonds. Crossing the space between us, I pulled my daughter into a fierce, lingering embrace. When we at last parted, our faces reflected brilliant mirrors of steadfast love and hope for the future shimmering just over the horizon. For while Garrett Hughes's karmic path ended in a prison cell, ours continued to hell. Ever onward, uplifting, inspiring, and blazing towards brilliant new horizons of our own authoring.
Emma had mentioned earlier in the week that an important dinner with international partners was scheduled for Friday evening, and her attendance was non-negotiable. She explained that it was an excellent opportunity to make a strong impression on senior management and potentially secure a promotion. I listened quietly, nodding as she spoke. Emma had always been ambitious, and her dedication to her career was one of the things I respected about her. I had my own plans for the evening, spending a few hours in the garage working on the old motorcycle I'd recently started restoring. As Friday evening approached, Emma spent considerable time in front of the mirror. She carefully selected her outfit, adjusted her makeup, and tried on different accessories. Her dress was elegant, understated yet sophisticated, the kind of attire one would expect at a high-profile business dinner. Before leaving, she showed me the official invitation, as if to underline the formality of the event. I simply nodded and wished her luck. She left around 6 in the evening, and I went down to the garage, toolbox in hand, ready to lose myself in the hum of machinery and the scent of engine oil. Time passed quickly as I worked. The rhythmic sound of metal tools against metal components was oddly soothing. Around 9, my phone buzzed with a notification. Emma had sent me a photo from the restaurant, a beautifully arranged table, gourmet dishes, and a glass of wine gleaming under the soft lights. I smiled slightly and went back to my work, satisfied that she seemed to be enjoying herself. An hour later, I decided to check in. I sent her a quick message asking how things were going. Her reply came a few minutes later: everything was going smoothly, and the partners were far more personable than she'd expected. Her words felt genuine, and there was no reason to suspect otherwise. I placed my phone aside and continued working on the stubborn bolts of the motorcycle's engine. By 10, something urged me to call her. I don't know if it was intuition or just curiosity, but I dialed her number. Emma picked up almost immediately. Her voice was steady, but there was an edge to it, as if she were distracted by something in the background. I could hear faint music and the low hum of many voices, blending together in a distant murmur. She explained that the negotiations were intense, and she had stepped away to the restroom with some of the girls for a short break. She assured me everything was fine, though her tone felt slightly off, not nervous, but restrained. As we spoke, I caught a glimpse of movement on her video call, the vague silhouette of a man passed briefly in the background. It was too fleeting to make anything of it. After we hung up, I tried to shake off the odd feeling that lingered. I went back to the garage, but my focus had shifted. The nuts and bolts felt more stubborn than before, and I found myself glancing at my phone every few minutes. At around 11, Emma sent me a short video. In it, she was seated at the table, laughing as an attentive waiter presented a dessert platter with an elaborate flourish. Her expression was relaxed, and the scene seemed perfectly normal. The doubts that had been creeping in began to dissipate. If something was wrong, surely it wouldn't look this natural. Shortly after midnight, Emma texted again. She explained that the dinner was dragging on because one of the clients was a wine enthusiast and insisted on discussing every detail of the project over multiple glasses. Her message carried a mix of humor and mild exasperation, and it felt like her usual tone. She promised she wouldn't be too late, but by then, I had already resolved to wait up for her. It was nearly 2:30 in the morning when I heard the car pull into the driveway. I met her at the door. She looked tired but composed, her posture straight and her movements deliberate. There was a faint wine stain on the hem of her dress, which she casually dismissed as the result of a clumsy colleague's mishap. Her hair was slightly tousled, but nothing out of the ordinary for someone who had spent hours at a crowded dinner table. As she walked past me, a faint trace of expensive men's cologne lingered in the air. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, and I immediately reasoned that it could easily have come from one of the executives she'd been seated near. Emma must have noticed my slight hesitation because she sighed and went on to explain. She described how the entire room was filled with an overwhelming mixture of colognes, perfumes, and the lingering scent of wine. The combination had been so intense that it nearly made her nauseous at one point. To back up her claim, she even showed me a group chat with her female colleagues, where they had been exchanging messages about the most overpowering and unpleasant scents they had encountered during the evening. One text, in particular, joked about a specific cologne being a biohazard in a bottle. I nodded slowly as she spoke, her explanation aligning with her usual candid honesty. Emma recounted the evening briefly, mentioning how one of the senior clients had expressed interest in launching a collaborative project. Her voice was steady, her gaze unwavering. I nodded along as she spoke, not interrupting, not probing for unnecessary details. There was nothing in her demeanor that suggested guilt or dishonesty. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual and went straight to the kitchen for coffee. Emma was already there, speaking softly into her phone. Her back was to me, and I caught just a fragment of her conversation. "It was nice talking to you last night." Her tone was casual, almost cheerful, but the words stuck with me. When she noticed me, she ended the call quickly, turning to greet me with a warm smile. "Good morning," she said, pouring me a cup of coffee. "How's the motorcycle coming along?" I studied her for a moment before answering. Everything about her seemed perfectly normal. Her movements were fluid, her smile genuine. There was no hesitation, no faltering under my gaze. I responded casually and sipped my coffee, letting the moment pass without confrontation. The rest of the day unfolded without incident. Emma busied herself with chores and emails, while I retreated to the garage again. My mind occasionally drifted back to dinner, to the phone call, to the faint smell of cologne and the fleeting silhouette on her screen. Yet none of these things amounted to anything concrete. Emma had always been honest, dependable, and dedicated to her work. The dinner made sense. The circumstances checked out. There was no clear reason to doubt her. And yet, a faint unease remained, a subtle shadow in the corner of my mind that refused to fade entirely. Emma had mentioned earlier in the week that she was planning to go to a fitness session with her friend after work on Friday. She had recently purchased a membership at an upscale fitness club, and according to her, the workouts there weren't just about physical exertion, they were a way to clear her head and reset mentally. I didn't question it. Emma had always been disciplined when she committed to something new, and this wasn't out of character for her. I had my own plans for the evening, a football match with some friends at Mike's apartment. Before leaving, Emma spent an unusually long time fussing with her gym bag. She unzipped it, rearranged its contents, zipped it up again, and repeated the process several times. I noticed but said nothing. Just as she was about to step out the door, she paused, smacked her forehead lightly, and announced she'd forgotten her sneakers. She darted back upstairs, returned a few minutes later, gave a quick wave, and headed out. As she walked away, I caught a glimpse of her leggings. They were brand new, sleek, and stylish, more suited for a photo shoot than a grueling workout. I shrugged it off. Women often dressed well even for mundane activities. The match started, and I got absorbed in the game, surrounded by laughter, beer bottles, and the loud commentary from the TV. Around 8 o'clock, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Emma, a photo from the gym locker room. The picture showed a row of lockers, a bench, a plastic water bottle, and her reflection faintly visible in the mirror. The accompanying text was brief, something about a tough run on the treadmill and feeling exhausted. I replied with a simple okay, and returned to the match. An hour or so later, during halftime, I felt the urge to check in again. I called her. She picked up immediately, her voice steady but low, as if she was trying not to be overheard. In the background, I could hear faint voices, but no music or the typical sounds of a busy gym, no clanking weights, no whirring of treadmill belts. She explained that she was in the far locker room, where it was always quieter. She added that she had just finished her workout and was about to hit the showers. The explanation made sense, yet something about the ambience on the other end of the line didn't quite match what I expected. By midnight, Emma walked through the front door. She was wearing the same workout outfit she had left in, but it looked nearly pristine, no visible sweat stains, no signs of exertion. Her hair was neatly tied back, and her face was fresh, not flushed or tired. She walked into the kitchen, grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge, and sat down at the table. I followed and sat across from her. "How was the workout?" I asked casually. She smiled, took a sip of water, and started recounting her evening. She talked about the treadmill, the different workout sets, and how her friend Sarah had pushed her to keep going when she wanted to stop. Her words flowed easily, and there were no awkward pauses or hesitations. But as she spoke, my eyes wandered to the gym bag sitting by her feet. It looked unusually light for a bag supposedly stuffed with sweaty clothes, towels, and gym essentials. The zipper on the bag was slightly open, and I could see a glimpse of what was inside: clean, neatly folded leggings and a spare top. My brow furrowed slightly. "Your bag seems pretty light," I said casually, trying to keep my tone neutral. Emma didn't miss a beat. "I forgot my towel in the gym's drying room," she said confidently. "That's probably why it feels lighter." Her explanation was quick and precise, but it felt rehearsed, like she'd anticipated the question. Before I could say anything else, she pulled out her phone and showed me a short video. In it, she was sitting on a bench in what was clearly a gym locker room. She was laughing, slightly disheveled, and taking a sip from her water bottle. Behind her, rows of lockers and gym bags were visible. The person filming, presumably Sarah, was off camera but could be heard joking about Emma's exhausted face. The video was convincing. If it was staged, it was well done. I nodded and leaned back in my chair. Emma didn't stop there. She dialed Sarah right in front of me, put the phone on speaker, and waited. Sarah answered almost immediately, her voice bright and casual. "Hey, Sarah," Emma said. "Alex was just asking about our workout earlier." "Oh, yeah." Sarah responded enthusiastically. "Emma killed it tonight. We were both dying by the end of it. Honestly, I don't know how we even made it through the last set." The conversation was short, light-hearted, and didn't sound forced. When the call ended, Emma put down her phone and looked at me with a small smile. "See? Just a normal gym night," she said lightly. I nodded again, leaning back in my chair. Her story checked out. There were no visible cracks in her narrative, no mismatched details. And yet, something still didn't sit right with me. It wasn't the words, or even her actions, it was just a faint feeling, like an itch in the back of my mind that I couldn't quite scratch. I stood up, stretched, and let out a breath. "All right," I said, letting my tone relax. "Let's drop it." "But Emma, you've been acting a little strange lately." She tilted her head slightly, her smile softening. "You know," I continued, meeting her gaze, "if something ever happens, if there's ever something I need to know, I'll find out. You understand that, right?" Emma nodded slowly, her eyes locked onto mine. "I understand," she said softly. "Don't worry. Everything's fine." Her words were calm, her demeanor steady. But as I turned away and walked back to the living room, that faint unease lingered. It was a quiet, nagging presence, impossible to fully dismiss. Emma mentioned in the morning that she had an important client meeting scheduled at the office later that evening. She explained that negotiations might stretch late into the night, so I shouldn't expect her home for dinner. I nodded absent-mindedly, my eyes glued to the spreadsheet on my laptop. I was buried in my own project deadlines and didn't give much thought to her plans. Emma had always been professional and dedicated when it came to her work, and late meetings weren't unusual for her. As evening approached, around 7, Emma sent me a photo of the conference room. The image showed a long, polished table, a glass of water, an open laptop, and rows of empty chairs. Her accompanying message was brief: "The client is running late, but I'm already here. We'll start any minute now." It seemed normal, routine even. I sent back a short "okay" and turned my attention back to my work. Hours passed, and the silence in the apartment felt heavier as the night wore on. At around 10 o'clock, I leaned back in my chair and decided to call her. She answered almost immediately, her voice low and steady. In the background, faint voices could be heard, but there was no distinctive noise one might associate with a busy office negotiation, no overlapping chatter, no clinking glasses, no rustle of papers. Emma explained that she was sitting in the corner of the conference room, keeping her voice down while the client wrapped up his remarks. She sounded calm, almost rehearsed, but I didn't push further. I simply said, "Understood," and ended the call. Just before midnight, Emma texted again, "Finally done. Heading home now." An hour later, the sound of her keys in the front door lock broke the stillness of the night. She stepped inside confidently, dropped her handbag near the entrance, and walked straight to the kitchen. I was already there, sipping on a cup of tea. She looked composed, her hair still neatly styled, her makeup flawless, her white blouse crisp and nearly wrinkle-free. The only anomaly was a small stain on the cuff of her blazer, but it was so faint that I barely registered it. "How did it go?" I asked, keeping my eyes on my cup. Emma launched into a detailed summary of the evening. She described how the client had been unusually meticulous about the terms of the contract, how the back-and-forth discussions had dragged on until the office was nearly empty. Her tone was smooth, her words precise. There were no gaps, no stumbles. Yet, as she spoke, my eyes drifted to her handbag by the door. It looked oddly light for a bag that was supposedly carrying documents and possibly a laptop. "Your bag seems pretty light," I remarked casually. Emma barely hesitated. "I left the documents at the office," she said. "It was late, and I didn't want to carry everything back home. I'll pick them up tomorrow." Her delivery was sharp and confident, but something about the explanation felt practiced. She reached into the fridge, pulled out a bottle of water, and took a sip. Her movements were fluid, controlled. I decided not to press further. The answers had been given, and pushing would only escalate things unnecessarily. I finished my tea, stood up, and walked to the bedroom. The next morning, while reaching into our shared wardrobe to grab my jacket, something caught my attention. Wedged into the corner of one of Emma's blazer pockets was a crumpled receipt. Without thinking, I pulled it out and unfolded it. It was from a coffee shop, time-stamped right around the time Emma was supposedly in the middle of her client meeting. The receipt listed 2 coffees and a croissant. At breakfast, I placed the receipt calmly on the table between us. 2 coffees and a croissant? In the middle of late-night negotiations? I asked, my voice steady, void of accusation. Emma looked down at the receipt, then back up at me. Her expression didn't waver. "The client was late," she said. I grabbed a quick bite with a colleague while we waited. The conference room was freezing, and we had time to kill. Her explanation was smooth, her voice measured. She met my gaze directly, without flinching. I leaned back slightly, studying her face, searching for any crack in her composure. There was none. I nodded slowly and reached for my coffee cup. But I wasn't done. "And your makeup?" I said after a pause. "It looks fresh. Like you just got ready, not like you spent hours in a tense meeting." Emma smirked faintly and shook her head. "Good makeup, Alex. It's not rocket science. Besides, are we really doing this? This feels like a police interrogation." Her attempt at humor didn't quite land. The smile was there, but it felt controlled, deliberate. I said nothing more. I drank my coffee, set the cup down, and got up to wash it in the sink. Later that day, the conversation still weighed on me. I decided to call an old acquaintance who worked in the same industry. We exchanged pleasantries, talked about work, and eventually, I brought up the client Emma had mentioned. "Yeah, that meeting," he said casually. "Tough negotiations, I heard. They were in the office until pretty late. Must have been exhausting." His words settled something inside me. The timeline matched, the details checked out. If there had been any inconsistencies or oddities about Emma's story, they didn't seem to have made their way into the professional circles. I hung up the phone and let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. The knot in my chest loosened slightly. There would always be small details that didn't quite add up, coincidences, oddities, little cracks in the narrative that could easily be explained away. For now, though, the pieces seemed to fit. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. "All right," I muttered to myself. "Maybe everything really is fine." Emma had mentioned the day before that she would be staying home over the weekend to work on an urgent project for her boss. She explained that it was easier to concentrate at home than in the office, where constant interruptions made focus nearly impossible. I didn't question her decision, it was logical, and Emma had always been diligent about her work. Early on Saturday morning, my father and I packed up the truck with fishing gear and set out for our 2-day trip. The weather was promising, and the drive was peaceful. By the second day, the sky had turned grey, and clouds gathered on the horizon. My father suggested we head back earlier than planned. The fish had been biting well, and there was no point in risking getting caught in heavy rain. I agreed, and by late afternoon, we were pulling into the driveway. My father decided to stay behind with the gear, sorting and cleaning it, while I headed upstairs to our apartment. The moment I opened the door, I could hear the faint sound of a knife against a cutting board. Emma was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables. She flinched slightly at the sound of the door unlocking, but quickly turned around with a smile. "Oh, you're early." "How was the fishing trip?" she asked, her tone light and casual. "It was good," I replied, taking off my jacket and glancing at her briefly. The kitchen table caught my attention. 2 plates with remnants of food, 2 wine glasses with faint rings at the bottom, and 2 empty coffee cups sat there. The scene suggested recent company. "Had company?" I asked, nodding toward the table. "Yes, Kate came by," Emma said easily. "She helped me with some spreadsheets, and we had lunch together." Her explanation was smooth, her tone even. It made sense. Kate was one of her close friends and often helped Emma with work-related tasks. I nodded and moved toward the bedroom to change out of my outdoor clothes. As I walked through the living room, something bright on the carpet caught my eye, a yellow sock, crumpled near the edge of the couch. It wasn't mine, and it definitely wasn't Emma's. I picked it up, turned it over in my hand, and tucked it into my pocket without a word. In the bathroom, a damp towel was slung over the rack. It was bunched up, not neatly hung like Emma usually left her towels. It struck me as slightly out of character, but again, I brushed the thought aside. Maybe Kate had used it after washing her hands or freshening up. When I returned to the kitchen, Emma was still chopping vegetables, her focus on the cutting board. I placed the yellow sock on the counter. "What's this?" I asked casually. Emma glanced over, her brow furrowing slightly before her expression cleared. Oh, that's Kate's. She came over straight from yoga and must have left it behind when she changed out of her workout clothes. She said she was in a hurry. Her answer was quick and confident. I considered it for a moment and then shrugged. It was plausible. Kate was known for being scatterbrained sometimes, and forgetting something as small as a sock wasn't unusual for her. The evening carried on without any tension. Emma cooked dinner, and I helped set the table. As we ate, she casually mentioned that her boss had called earlier. Apparently, if she completed her project on time, there was a good chance she'd be considered for a promotion. Her voice was steady, and her expression was composed. I nodded, congratulating her lightly. Later, while Emma was tidying up the kitchen, I overheard her talking on the phone. Her voice was bright and cheerful, and I caught snippets of her conversation. Kate, thanks again for helping out. Honestly, I don't know what I would have done without you. And that wine you brought? Perfect. Yeah, the spreadsheets are all sorted now. Her tone was relaxed, and her laugh was genuine. It sounded like an ordinary conversation between friends. I returned my attention to the news on my phone and didn't think much more about it. After dinner, Emma and I settled into our usual evening routine. She went back to her laptop to finalize some details on her project, and I spent some time watching TV. Everything felt normal, routine. When I eventually got up to put away the dishes, I noticed the yellow sock still sitting on the hallway console table. I picked it up and placed it neatly on the edge, figuring Kate would probably swing by soon to collect it. The next morning, just as I was finishing breakfast, the doorbell rang. It was Kate. She greeted me with her usual cheerful demeanor and immediately spotted the sock. Oh my gosh, there it is, she said with a laugh, picking it up. I knew I left it somewhere. I swear I'm the most forgetful person alive. I chuckled lightly and nodded as she waved goodbye and disappeared down the hallway. Emma appeared in the doorway, coffee cup in hand. Told you it was Kate's, she said with a playful smile. Yep, you did, I replied simply. The day carried on as usual. Emma went back to her project, and I spent some time cleaning up the garage. The details of the previous evening, the sock, the towel, the conversation, all fit into a neat little narrative. There was no lingering doubt, no unexplained gaps. It started with good news. Emma came home late one Friday evening, slightly unsteady on her feet and flushed from alcohol. She kicked off her heels at the door, holding a bottle of expensive champagne in one hand and her purse in the other. Her smile was wide, and her eyes sparkled with excitement. Guess what? She said, leaning against the doorframe. I looked up from the TV, mildly surprised. What happened? I got promoted. Again? She exclaimed, throwing her arms in the air triumphantly. We celebrated at the office, but now I'm home, and we're celebrating together. I stood and walked over to her, offering a congratulatory hug. Emma had always been ambitious and driven, so a promotion wasn't entirely unexpected. But there was something about her demeanor, her excitement felt almost exaggerated, her energy a bit too manic. Still, I pushed those thoughts aside and joined her in a toast. The following week passed uneventfully. Emma seemed focused on her new responsibilities, working late and occasionally leaving early in the morning for meetings. I didn't think much of it, success demanded sacrifices, and she had always been ready to make them. But things took a sharp turn one Thursday evening when my phone rang. It was one of Emma's colleagues, a guy I'd met briefly at an office Christmas party. He was awkward, overly formal, and always seemed to sweat even in air-conditioned rooms. I answered, curious about why he was calling me. Alex, we need to meet. It's about Emma. It's important. His voice was serious, almost urgent. Can't you just tell me over the phone? I asked, glancing at the clock. No. This isn't something I can explain here. Meet me at O'Malley's bar in an hour. Please. I hesitated, then agreed. I told Emma I needed to run an errand, something about dropping off a screwdriver at my dad's place. She barely acknowledged me, engrossed in her laptop and a pile of papers. At the bar, the colleague was already there, nervously drumming his fingers against a glass of soda. I sat down across from him. "What's this about?" I asked. He looked around, making sure no one was listening, then leaned forward. "Do you know what your wife does with her boss?" I froze for a moment, my expression neutral. "No." "Enlighten me." "She's been promoted 3 times, Alex." 3. In less than a year. Do you think that's normal? People in our office wait years for just one promotion. And Emma? She's climbing the ladder like it's an escalator. I didn't respond. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out his phone, and unlocked it. What he showed me made my stomach drop. On the screen was a video. A shaky, low-quality recording, but the content was unmistakable. Emma, on her knees, in her boss's office, performing something that left little to the imagination. I stared at the screen, my face devoid of emotion. When the video ended, he pocketed his phone and leaned back in his seat. That's how she's earning those promotions. And while we've been breaking our backs for scraps, she's been. Well, you've seen it yourself. I stayed silent, processing what I'd just seen. But, he continued, there's a way to fix this. If you want revenge, real revenge, we can set her up. We can make sure she gets caught, publicly humiliated, and fired. All you have to do is play along and not tip her off. The idea was simple, but effective. He'd plant evidence, subtly sabotage her work, and expose her relationship with the boss at the most critical moment. She'd be left with nothing. I considered it. It was cold, calculated, and efficient. I nodded. Okay. Let's do it. I left the bar without another word, got into my car, and drove home. Emma was already asleep when I arrived, curled up on her side of the bed. I stood in the doorway for a moment, studying her face, the face I thought I knew so well. Carefully, I walked over to her nightstand and picked up her phone. It was locked, but I knew her passcode. Emma had always been predictable in that way. I navigated through her apps until I found one I didn't recognize, an encrypted messaging platform. Inside, there was a hidden chat. What I read confirmed everything. Emma and her boss had been meticulously planning every detail. The fake dinner with clients, the staged gym visit, even the conveniently forgotten yellow sock, all of it had been orchestrated. They mocked me openly, congratulating each other on how easily I had accepted their excuses. That first fake dinner was genius. He didn't question a thing. The gym alibi was risky, but Sarah played her part perfectly. The sock almost blew it, but quick thinking saved us. Message after message, their arrogance was palpable. They were so sure of themselves, so confident that I'd never catch on. I took screenshots of everything, every message, every detail, every piece of evidence, and transferred them to my phone. Then I placed Emma's phone back exactly where I'd found it. I walked out of the bedroom and into the living room, sitting down on the couch in the dark. My phone buzzed as the screenshots finished transferring. There was nothing left to do now but wait. Emma had built this web herself, thread by thread, and soon enough, she'd be trapped in it. Revenge didn't need to be rushed. It would unfold naturally, step by step. All I had to do was let it happen. It started slowly, almost imperceptibly. The cracks in Emma's professional image appeared as faint hairline fractures, but they spread rapidly. The first incident involved critical project files disappearing from the company server just days before a major presentation. Emma was responsible for overseeing the project, and despite her claims of not knowing how it happened, the damage was done. Her team managed to recover the files, but it was too late. The client had already been informed of the delay, and trust was shaken. Whispers circulated in the office halls, casual mentions of incompetence and carelessness. Some even hinted at sabotage. Next came the financial reports. The budget for a high-profile corporate event was suddenly under scrutiny. Numbers didn't add up, and discrepancies appeared in the expenditure columns. Emma's name was all over those documents, stamped and signed. Meetings were held, questions were asked, and the insinuations became sharper. Some colleagues raised their eyebrows, suggesting that perhaps the discrepancies weren't accidental. Emma defended herself, presented emails and spreadsheets, but the seed of doubt had been planted, and it was spreading. An anonymous email landed in the HR inbox a few days later. It contained a collection of screenshots, fabricated messages, doctored images, and cherry-picked phrases from Emma's actual conversations, twisted out of context. The materials painted a damning picture: an employee overstepping boundaries, potentially engaging in unethical behavior. HR launched an internal investigation. Emma was summoned for questioning multiple times, each meeting stripping away another layer of her confidence. The tension in the office became unbearable for her. Colleagues who had once been warm and friendly were now distant, their greetings reduced to curt nods or murmured pleasantries. Gossip spread like wildfire, and Emma found herself increasingly isolated. Every glance felt loaded with judgment, every interaction hollow and insincere. Then came the sabotage of a critical project. Emails with vital instructions were sent to contractors, but the data was intentionally incorrect. Timelines were missed, resources were wasted, and the end product was riddled with errors. As the project leader, Emma bore the brunt of the backlash. The higher-ups were furious. Meetings turned into interrogations, and Emma's explanations fell on deaf ears. Her team members turned against her, subtly distancing themselves from the fallout. The murmurs grew louder, and the narrative took on a life of its own. Emma was reckless, inattentive, and ultimately unfit for her position. The weight of responsibility became suffocating, and yet, every time she tried to defend herself, the evidence seemed to pile higher against her. The final blow came in the form of a manufactured email thread. Someone had created a fake account under Emma's name and initiated a series of incriminating messages with her boss. The content was suggestive, inappropriate, and impossible to explain away. During a company-wide meeting, the thread was displayed on a large screen, a damning visual for everyone in attendance. Emma's face turned pale as she realized the trap had closed completely. After the meeting, she was summoned to the executive office. The conversation was brief. Her resignation was presented as the only viable option, though the tone left little room for it to feel voluntary. She walked out of the office building with a cardboard box of her belongings, her heels clicking hollowly against the marble floor. That evening, she came home. I was sitting in the living room, scrolling through my phone when I heard the door open. Emma stepped inside, clutching her box of office supplies like a lifeline. Her eyes were red, her makeup smeared slightly at the edges. She set the box down by the door and walked toward me slowly. "It's over," she said, her voice cracking. "They fired me." I looked at her, keeping my face neutral. "Why? What happened?" "They think I did all of it," she whispered, sinking onto the couch beside me. "The files, the finances, the emails. They think I sabotaged everything on purpose. But I didn't, Alex. I swear I didn't. Things just happened. One after another, like dominoes falling." Her hands were trembling, and tears welled up in her eyes. She buried her face in her hands and let out a quiet sob. I reached out, placed a hand on her shoulder, and gave it a gentle squeeze. "It's going to be okay," I said softly. "You'll figure it out." She looked up at me, her expression desperate, searching for reassurance. "Do you believe me?" I held her gaze for a moment before nodding slightly. "Of course." But inside, beneath the calm exterior, I felt something else entirely, a cold satisfaction, a sense of grim fulfillment. This was justice served cold, a plan unfolding exactly as intended. She continued to speak, her words disjointed and her thoughts scattered. She blamed office politics, jealous colleagues, even sheer bad luck. But nowhere in her ramblings was there even a hint of self-awareness or accountability. Later that night, Emma retreated to the bedroom early. She was emotionally drained, her spirit broken by the relentless series of blows she'd endured. I sat alone in the living room, staring at the flickering television screen, the light casting sharp shadows across the walls. In my mind, I replayed every step, the fake emails, the missing documents, the planted evidence. It had all been so perfectly executed. Every move, every detail, every subtle manipulation had led to this inevitable conclusion. As the night stretched on, I allowed myself a brief smirk. Emma had built her career on deception, on playing a game she thought she could win. But in the end, the house of cards had collapsed, and all that remained was the fallout. She had no idea that I had been aware all along. That I had been part of it. That her downfall had been carefully orchestrated, not by fate or coincidence, but by calculated hands. I stood up, stretched, and walked toward the bedroom. Emma was asleep, her breathing steady and even. I watched her for a moment before turning off the lights. This wasn't the end. Not yet. But the stage was set, and the final act was approaching. As I lay down beside her, one thought echoed in my mind: this is far from over. I had made up my mind. Divorce was no longer just a distant thought, it was a carefully crafted plan in motion. Emma had no idea, and that was exactly how I wanted it. Every step was calculated, every decision weighed. I didn't allow myself to waver. Over the course of weeks, I started making arrangements in secret. Every time I said I was meeting a friend, running errands, or staying late at work, I was actually meeting with my lawyer. A sharp, no-nonsense professional who specialized in clean, efficient breakups. Together, we drafted the necessary paperwork, discussed asset division, and strategized how to minimize any legal hurdles. I began to gather evidence, screenshots, emails, messages, every piece of the puzzle that painted the full picture of Emma's betrayal. I kept everything stored securely, organized, and ready to present if needed. There was no room for emotion, no space for doubt. I had learned my lesson: hesitation only created vulnerability. Emma was sharp, manipulative even, and if she suspected anything, she would try to control the narrative. I couldn't allow that. Over time, I began to mentally detach from her. Conversations became shorter, interactions more transactional. I stopped trying to analyze her words or actions, it didn't matter anymore. My goal was clear: to walk away cleanly and without unnecessary drama. I didn't want explanations, justifications, or emotional breakdowns. I wanted finality. I spent late nights reviewing the divorce papers, double-checking the fine print, and ensuring everything was airtight. The apartment, our savings, and even minor details like shared subscriptions were addressed. I planned how I would collect my belongings without drawing suspicion. A suitcase here, a box there, it was all done discreetly, piece by piece. The final act came on an evening when Emma had plans to visit a friend. She had been complaining about work and the fallout from her firing, and I encouraged her to take the night off, to relax. She left the apartment with a tired smile, and the moment the door closed behind her, I sprang into action. I packed my suitcase methodically, folding clothes with precision, ensuring I didn't leave anything behind that mattered. Important documents, passport, bank statements, and insurance papers were placed carefully in my bag. My laptop, hard drives, and any other personal items of value went next. I moved silently, aware of every sound in the quiet apartment. Before leaving, I wrote a letter. It was short, direct, and devoid of any ambiguity. I placed it neatly on the kitchen table, weighed down by a thick envelope containing the signed divorce papers. The letter read: I knew everything. Every excuse, every glance, every story you spun. You thought you were careful, but you underestimated me. The divorce is already filed, and nothing you say or do can change that. I won't be here to listen to explanations or apologies. Live your life however you want. Just know this: I was behind your downfall. Goodbye, Alex. With that, I walked out of the apartment, locking the door behind me for the last time. A few days later, I ran into one of our neighbors, a middle-aged man who always seemed to know everyone's business. He leaned against the railing, his voice low. You know, Alex, the night she came home and saw your letter, she broke down right there at the doorstep. I could hear her crying through the door. She was there for hours, man. Didn't move, didn't sleep, nothing. I nodded, my expression blank. I didn't feel pity, nor did I feel satisfaction. It was simply done. The legal proceedings moved quickly. My lawyer ensured that everything went according to plan. Emma didn't have much ground to stand on legally, especially with the evidence I had provided. There were no emotional scenes in courtrooms, no drawn-out battles. Everything was handled through paperwork and signatures. By the end of it, the chapter was closed. Emma tried to reach me several times in the weeks that followed. Calls, texts, and even emails. At first, they were angry, accusatory, even. Then they softened, turned into long-winded apologies and attempts to explain herself. I didn't read most of them. I had no interest in reopening that door. Months passed, and my life started to regain clarity. I moved into a new apartment, larger, brighter, and without the shadows of my previous life haunting the corners. I focused on work, poured my energy into building something meaningful. On weekends, I spent hours in the garage, working on my motorcycle, finding solace in the hum of the engine and the feel of tools in my hands. Friends came and went, and I even began meeting new people. There was no rush to jump into anything serious, no desperation to fill the void. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my own life. Emma, on the other hand, struggled. Rumors of her dismissal had spread through her professional network, making it difficult for her to find stable employment. Relationships she tried to form seemed to fall apart just as quickly as they began. Her charm and quick wit couldn't mask the cracks beneath the surface. Every so often, I would receive another message from her, long paragraphs filled with regret, explanations, and pleas for forgiveness. But my resolve never wavered. I had made peace with my decisions, and there was no turning back. Sometimes I wondered if Emma truly understood the extent of what had happened, if she recognized how every decision she made had led her to this point. But those thoughts were fleeting. I didn't let them linger. I had built a new life, brick by brick, and it was solid. Stable. Emma was nothing more than a chapter one had finished reading, a cautionary tale, perhaps, but nothing more. No matter how many messages she sent, how many calls she made, I never responded. The silence was my final word, and it spoke louder than anything I could have said.
Welcome to my channel, where every story comes to life. Dive into captivating narratives that spark your imagination. Let's start today new narrative story. Imagine thinking your life was perfect. Married to your best friend, raising a wonderful child, living in a beautiful house by the beach, until one simple notification turned your entire world upside down. 4. Ethan Blake, a 36-year-old financial advisor from Sydney. This wasn't just a nightmare, it was his reality. What he thought was a loving marriage became a web of deceit, unraveling in ways he never expected. Join me on this emotional roller coaster as we dive into a story of betrayal, heartbreak, and a man's quest for justice. This is not just another tale of infidelity. It's a story about finding truth where lies once thrived. Ethan Blake and his wife, Chloe Blake, live in the vibrant northern beaches of Sydney, a picturesque area known for its ocean views, affluent residents, and laid-back coastal lifestyle. Ethan is a 36-year-old financial advisor, a man of routine who works long hours to provide for his family. Chloe, 34, is a yoga instructor who is well loved in their community, admired for her beauty, charm, and graceful demeanor. Together, they have an 8-year-old son named Jack, a curious and energetic boy who is the apple of his father's eye. Their social circle consists of close friends, many of whom envy the seemingly perfect life Ethan and Chloe have. They often host barbecues on weekends, spend time with other families, and take Jack to the beach for surfing lessons. Ethan, though successful in his career, always felt that family was his greatest achievement, until everything changed. It all started on a warm Saturday afternoon. Ethan sat in their spacious backyard, enjoying a cold beer as Jack kicked a football around. The scent of eucalyptus filled the air, and the sound of distant waves crashing onto the shore provided a soothing background. Chloe was lounging on a deck chair, her phone in hand, typing furiously. "Who are you texting?" Ethan asked with a smile, hoping for a light-hearted response. "Oh, just the girls. We're organizing a yoga retreat," Chloe replied without looking up, her voice too casual, too practiced. Ethan didn't think much of it at first, but as the weeks went by, her behavior grew more secretive. She had become glued to her phone, often texting late into the night, locking her screen when he entered the room. Something felt different. They had always shared everything, but now there was a distance between them. Conversations had become more superficial, and their once regular date nights dwindled into rare occasions. Ethan, always the rational thinker, tried to dismiss his suspicions. After all, Chloe was a busy woman, and he knew his long hours at work didn't help. But there was a nagging feeling in the pit of his stomach that he couldn't shake. One evening, while Chloe was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Ethan glanced at it out of curiosity, his eyes landing on a message from someone named Josh. "Last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about you." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Josh? Who the hell was Josh? Ethan's hands trembled as he stared at the message. His mind raced, piecing together every odd behavior Chloe had exhibited over the past few months. He quickly put the phone down when he heard the water stop, his heart pounding in his chest. He spent the next few days in a state of paranoia, watching Chloe closely, replaying moments in his head. Could she really be having an affair? Ethan had never doubted Chloe before, but now every smile, every glance at her phone seemed suspicious. His mind was consumed by the possibility. Unable to bear the uncertainty any longer, Ethan decided to take matters into his own hands. Late one night, after Chloe had fallen asleep, he installed a discreet app on her phone that synced her messages to his own. He felt a pang of guilt as he set it up, knowing it was an invasion of privacy. But Ethan needed to know the truth. He couldn't confront her without proof. For the next few days, the app picked up nothing suspicious. The messages were casual, often related to her yoga clients or friends. Ethan began to wonder if he had been overreacting, doubting himself for suspecting her. But just when he was about to uninstall the app, the real bombshell dropped. One evening, as Ethan sat alone in his home office, a series of texts between Chloe and Josh appeared on his screen. He froze, staring at the words, his world crumbling around him. Josh wasn't just some casual acquaintance. He was her lover. Josh, a 31-year-old personal trainer at Chloe's yoga studio, had been having an affair with Chloe for months. The texts were filled with flirtation, intimate details of their encounters, and plans for future meetups. Chloe had told Josh things she hadn't shared with Ethan in years, the emotional depth of their conversations sank, even more than the physical betrayal. She had confided in Josh, complained about her marriage, and painted Ethan as the neglectful, absent husband. Ethan's hands shook as he scrolled through the messages, each one more painful than the last. He had given his all to their marriage, to their family. How could she do this to him? To Jack? The next morning, Ethan could barely focus. His mind was racing, filled with a toxic mix of rage, sadness, and confusion. He knew he had to confront Chloe, but the thought of the conversation terrified him. He didn't want to believe it was real, but the messages were undeniable proof. There was no escaping the truth. After Jack left for school, Ethan found Chloe in the kitchen, sipping her morning coffee. She greeted him with a smile, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside him. "Chloe, we need to talk," Ethan said, his voice steady but cold. Chloe looked up, her smile faltering. "What's wrong?" Ethan placed her phone on the counter, unlocked, with the incriminating messages on display. He watched as the color drained from her face. She didn't say a word, but her eyes were filled with guilt. "I know about Josh," Ethan said, his voice shaking with emotion. "I know everything." Chloe's hands trembled as she reached for the phone, her eyes darting over the messages. Tears welled up in her eyes as she realized she had been caught. She looked up at Ethan, her voice barely a whisper. "Ethan, I'm so sorry." "Sorry? That's all you have to say?" Ethan's voice cracked, his anger rising to the surface. "You've been lying to me for months. How could you do this to us? To Jack?" Chloe broke down, sobbing into her hands. She tried to explain, to justify her actions. She said she had felt lonely, neglected, that Ethan had been too focused on work and not enough on their relationship. She claimed that Josh had given her the attention she had been craving, that it had started as an emotional connection and spiraled into something more. But Ethan wasn't buying it. They had both been busy. They had both struggled with balancing work and family, but he had never strayed. He had never even considered it. Chloe's betrayal wasn't just a mistake. It was a choice, a selfish, deliberate choice. Ethan walked away from the conversation, unable to process the magnitude of what had just happened. He couldn't look at Chloe without feeling a wave of disgust and anger. He couldn't believe that the woman he had loved and trusted for over a decade had done this to him. Over the next few days, Ethan thought about his next move. He wasn't going to make any rash decisions, but he wasn't going to let Chloe off easy either. He wanted justice, for himself and for Jack. First, Ethan contacted a lawyer and began the process of filing for divorce. He made sure that their assets would be divided fairly and that Jack would be protected in the custody arrangements. Chloe had no idea that Ethan was moving so quickly behind the scenes. She thought she still had time to fix things, to repair the damage she had caused. But Ethan had no intention of letting her back into his life. Next, Ethan started subtly unraveling Chloe's reputation. They had a tight-knit circle of friends, many of whom admired Chloe for her grace and beauty. Slowly, Ethan began telling close friends about what had happened. He didn't embellish the truth or paint himself as a victim. He simply laid out the facts, allowing others to draw their own conclusions. Word spread fast. Chloe's perfect image began to crumble. Friends who once admired her now whispered behind her back. Their social circle, once filled with barbecues and weekend outings, now avoided her. Josh, the younger man she had risked everything for, quickly distanced himself from her as well. He wasn't interested in being involved in the fallout of a broken marriage, especially when it became clear that Chloe's life was unraveling. Chloe found herself isolated, her perfect life shattered. The affair had cost her more than just her marriage. It had cost her friendships, respect, and the life she had carefully crafted. Ethan, on the other hand, slowly began to rebuild his life. The divorce was painful, and adjusting to shared custody of Jack was difficult, but he was determined to move forward. He threw himself into his work, focusing on expanding his business and securing a stable future for himself and Jack. He also spent more time with Jack, making sure that his son knew he was loved and supported. They took weekend trips to the beach, went on hikes, and explored Sydney together. Jack, though young, sensed the tension between his parents, but Ethan made sure to shield him from the worst of it. He didn't want his son to carry the weight of their broken marriage. One afternoon, as Ethan and Jack walked along the shoreline, the sun setting behind them, Ethan felt a sense of peace for the first time in months. The pain of Chloe's betrayal still lingered, but it no longer consumed him. He had taken back control of his life, and he was moving forward, one step at a time. And that, my friends, is how Ethan discovered the double life his wife had been leading, hidden behind the simplicity of a mobile chat. It's a stark reminder that betrayal often starts small, with the secrets we think we can keep hidden. But the truth has a way of coming to light, no matter how deeply it's buried. What would you do if you were in Ethan's shoes? How would you handle the situation? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.
The old Winchester might have been made in USA. Ted Vincent placed it in a tree overlooking the estate's pool. Wearing rubber gloves and using a small monocle, Ted was just 70 yards from the pool where several lounge chairs were set up. The pool was on the estate of Byron Diamond, a millionaire entrepreneur. The tree was outside the estate, but close enough. Byron Diamond employed Ted's wife, Kara, a beautiful woman with dark brown hair. She planned to spend the weekend at Diamond's estate, as she had for the past 4 weekends. She openly told Ted about her intention to have a physical relationship with her boss when Diamond's wife, Miranda, did charity work. Ted didn't know if Miranda was aware of Kara's visits, but the estate staff likely knew. Diamond and Kara walked toward the pool, with Diamond in swim trunks and Kara in a strip and skimpy top. This wasn't the first time Ted had seen them like this. Over the past weeks, he had carefully observed the estate. Now he felt it was time to decide the fate of the two lovers. Diamond's model-like good looks and muscular physique made a striking couple with Kara. Ted could somewhat understand why Kara was attracted to Diamond, but understanding didn't mean acceptance. From the moment she announced her intentions, he was firmly against it. Ted and Kara, both 37, had been married for 16 years and had twin daughters, Claire and Beth, who were 15 and resembled their mother. The girls were currently at Ted's parents' house before heading to football camp. Ted was supposedly biking with his best friend, Miles Jacobs, his business partner and friend since first grade. Their company grew, and both men became wealthy. Miles was married to Robin, his childhood love. Robin had been a childhood sweetheart of both Miles and Ted, but Miles won her heart. Ted never understood why, as he and Miles were similar in appearance. Ted accepted it and found Kara in college, who was all he ever needed. A few months ago, Miles waited on the bike path some distance away while Kara was about to get a big surprise. Ted saw Kara and Diamond embrace, and the hug turned into a kiss. As soon as they broke the kiss and Kara walked away, Diamond's chest exploded. His body pulled away from Kara, who screamed and fell to the ground. Blood was everywhere. She crawled to the pool and dived in. Ted had seen enough. He climbed down from the tree, ran up the hill, and threw the rifle into the bushes. He removed the stock cover and gloves, stuffed them into a plastic bag on his belt, and jogged to his bike. He rode to the main bike path and, after ensuring no one was nearby, biked about 3 miles to join Miles. They continued their ride, and about 6 miles later, Ted disposed of the plastic bag in a dumpster. They finished their ride and arrived at Miles's house. The rifle didn't concern Ted. He assumed the police would find it, but they wouldn't get any DNA. He had owned the rifle for many years, having gotten it from a dying acquaintance. There were 2 rifles and 2 pistols. The other rifle was from World War II. Besides the rifle used today, the other weapons were in Ted's weapons safe. This rifle was never in the safe. Ted kept it hidden in the garage closet. When Kara announced her intention to have an affair with Diamond, Ted immediately thought of the rifle. He took her to his country property over the next week to ensure she shot accurately. After some adjustments, the rifle was ready. When they arrived at Miles's house, Robin greeted them with cold beers, asking, "How was the trip, guys?" Miles replied, "It was great. The track wasn't crowded, and we had a good workout, about 4 hours." Robin, a pleasant-looking woman with dark hair, hugged them both. Ted found her attractive, though she was Miles's wife. After some beers and a shower, they sat by the pool. Robin asked Ted, "How long do you think this thing with Kara will last?" She knew about Kara's weekend activities. Ted had confided in them, and while Robin thought he should kick Kara out immediately, Miles suggested waiting to protect their business and children. Ted had already made up his mind. He despised men who slept with others' wives, especially his own. Ted responded to Robin, "I have no idea. But Robin, I hope to continue my relationship with Nora." Robin repeated, "I still think it's time for you to leave Kara." Robin and Kara were never close, though their families communicated. Miles' sons, George and Ben, were close in age to Ted's twins. Despite social gatherings going well, Kara and Robin moved in different circles. Kara had her country club friends, while Robin was active in the Democratic Party and book clubs. Kara's job changed when she was hired by Diamond 2 years ago, while Robin stayed at her old company. As Ted sat there, he reflected on recent events and Kara's betrayal. For 20 months, he had no idea there was a problem. Their bed life was unchanged, and Kara was present at their daughter's soccer games. He was shocked when Kara confessed her intentions, late one night, saying, "Ted, I don't want to, but I'm going to do something. I hope this doesn't ruin things. I love you." Ted, usually stoic, remained calm. Kara continued, "Byron and I have developed a crush. His wife is away every weekend. I'll visit him starting this Friday. I don't know when it will stop." Ted didn't react outwardly. Internally, he knew he couldn't stop her and wouldn't try. He also knew Diamond was as good as dead. So was their marriage. He hadn't decided what to do with Kara yet. He loved her, but her negative qualities had peaked. Remembering the rifle in the garage, he closed his thoughts. Kara was startled when Ted smiled after about a minute. His genuine smile, which was unsettling to her, was triggered by thoughts of the rifle. "Do you find this funny?" she asked heatedly. "Not at all," he replied with a smile. His smile sent a shiver down her spine. Ted stood up and asked, "Have you already had lovemaking?" Kara hesitated. "No, just a few kisses. I'll sleep in the guest house. Let me know when you're done with the rich boy. Then we'll see what's left." Ted walked upstairs to pack for the night. Kara, sitting in the living room, felt unhappy with the turn of events, but was determined to go through with her plans. It was Wednesday, and she was eagerly anticipating her weekend with Byron, who was younger, rich, educated, and well-built. She realized her attraction after seeing him shirtless in the office gym. Kara expected the affair to last a few months, maybe leading to something more permanent. She loved Ted and appreciated the life he provided, but she was restless and very attracted to Byron. She was sure she and Ted would work it out eventually. Ted, unable to sleep that Wednesday night, had a lot on his mind. The twins were staying with friends for the weekend, giving him time to think and check his weapons. On Thursday, he went to his usual cafe for lunch, where he sometimes dined with Nora Hansen, a young woman with an athletic figure and dark hair. Nora reminded Ted of Robin in both appearance and behavior. They had been flirting for weeks, but Ted had no plans to pursue her until Kara announced her affair. That Thursday, Ted sat next to Nora in the booth instead of across from her. Nora, used to men hitting on her, noticed the change and was pleased. She had been saving a place for him for 2 weeks, hoping he'd take the hint. Nora knew Ted was married, but found him tempting. She turned to him and gave an eliminator smile. "Something's changed, huh?" Ted smiled. "Yeah, my wife decided to fool around with her boss." Nora put her hand on his thigh. And I was wondering if you'd like to have dinner and dance on Friday night." "Oh, Ted, I'd really like that," she said softly. Ted grinned, feeling foolish. She patted his cheek. He was hard as a rock and struggled to control himself. She stroked his cheek and he kissed her lightly on the lips. "I better not stay here. We could be arrested." They exchanged phone numbers. Returning to work, Ted felt like a schoolboy. Some employees noticed his change. Kara noticed too when he walked briskly home. Again, he surprised her. "I made lasagna and salad," she said, considering it a peace offering. She expected Ted to take her affair hard, so his response was unexpected. "Thank you. I'm hungry." His mood had clearly improved. Kara was suspicious and wondered if he had already moved on. After washing his face, they sat down to eat. Kara made up her mind. "I'm going to his house tomorrow." He glanced at her. "It's not too late to stop, Kara. I believe you'll regret this." She hesitated. This was a different Ted. For a moment she felt love for him but struggled with it. "I need this, Ted." He smiled. "I don't think we use the word need the same way, Kara." She cleared the plates. "I hope you see your path clearly and will go to bed with me tonight." "No. You'll see me when you're done with the rich boy. It will be clear then." Kara was disappointed. She had envisioned a pleasant night of lovemaking to end this phase of their marriage amicably. But this wasn't destined to happen. She realized she was done with it. Ted paused before heading to the guest house. "Maybe something will come back then, Kara, but most likely nothing." He walked out the door. Kara sat at the table, realizing she was risking her marriage. She had hoped things might return to normal after the affair ended, but now knew that was naive. Continuing with Byron would change her life unpredictably. She almost decided to end it, but doubted Ted would ever see her the same. She decided to proceed. Friday evening, Kara packed her bag before work, including a new tight-fitting nightgown. She was nervous, but thrilled when Byron kissed her in his office. They left work separately to avoid suspicion. Kara arrived at the estate at 6. Byron welcomed her warmly, kissing her as soon as the door closed. Excited, she hurried upstairs to the master bedroom. Byron struggled to carry her, a reminder that he wasn't as strong as Ted. In the bedroom, they quickly undressed and had intense, thrilling lovemaking. Though brief, it was satisfying. Kara believed they could reach new heights together. Byron was pleased, feeling he'd conquered her. Kara decided to excite him again, and after some time, they had lovemaking once more. Later, they went downstairs for dinner, where a feast awaited. "Did you like it?" Byron asked. "Certainly. And you?" Kara replied. "The very best," Byron said. Kara sang "Simply the Best," better than all the rest, feeling a pang of guilt as it was a song she and Ted often sang. After dinner, they watched a romantic movie in the bedroom. Byron wanted more lovemaking, but Kara insisted on finishing the movie first. They had lovemaking again, this time in a more subdued manner. Kara was impressed Byron could manage 3 times, though the third time was less impressive. Ted picked Nora up from her apartment in his classic MGB convertible, one of his hobbies. Nora was delighted with the ride, and with Ted, who looked great in his blue suit. Ted was equally delighted with her stunning dark red dress with a plunging neckline. They went to the Willington Hotel for a wonderful dinner, then danced nearby. Ted, always athletic, was a good dancer, one of the things he liked about Kara. Nora, light on her feet and sensual in her movements, captivated Ted. She reminded him more and more of Robin, but younger and a better dancer. They danced until they both suddenly wanted to find another place. Nora got into the car and looked at him. "Take me to your home." Ted controlled himself during the drive and drove carefully. 15 minutes later, he opened the front door and let Nora in. They couldn't make it out of the living room. Nora quickly undressed and Ted followed suit. Standing, they stared at each other before Nora attacked, throwing Ted onto the sofa. They began with such intensity and zeal as never before. In the morning, they woke to sunlight, showered together, and Ted prepared breakfast. Nora watched him, feeling in love but cautious. As he served eggs and toast, she said, "I'm in love with you, Ted. I just have to say it." Ted, surprised, thought about it and replied, "I believe the feeling is mutual. Let it be." Hard to believe so fast. "They're done with the eggs now?" "What?" asked Nora. Ted smiled. "Guess," he said, picking her up again. Kara and Ted's weekend continued as it began. Kara was pleased with Byron, who gave her a lot of pleasure. Ted felt head over heels for Nora. On Sunday afternoon, Kara and Byron agreed to see each other the next weekend. Ted and Nora began thinking about their future. They set a date for next Friday, depending on Kara's plans, and agreed to meet for lunch daily. Ted dropped Nora off at her apartment. Despite her youth, she was a lawyer and could afford good housing. Meanwhile, Kara drove home from Byron's. Ted had just returned when she walked through the door. They stared at each other, and Ted couldn't help but smile. Kara noticed. "How was your weekend? Alone? How is Richie Rich?" Ted grinned. If Kara had been honest, she would have said Byron was exciting, but Ted was better. Instead, she said, "He was great. I'll be leaving again next week. The girls won't be back until Sunday evening." She knew her plan had gone wrong. Ted was too happy. She also felt nervous about how to tell the girls what was happening. For dinner, they ordered Chinese food. Ted met Nora for lunch every day during the week. They planned to go to a concert on Friday and spend the weekend at her house. Ted and Kara communicated mechanically throughout the week. At work, Kara and Byron were careful, and at home, she hoped Ted would soften and take her back. No chance. Every night, he slept in the guest house. In the evenings, he watched baseball or read, not talking to Kara. He basically ignored her. Their marriage was frozen. While in the guest house, he walked through the backyard, looking around the Diamond estate. Using Google Maps and night vision goggles, he began building a mental diagram of the place. He also bought a device that amplified sound directionally with cash. The following weekend, Ted and Nora had a great time, but then she had to leave for Sunday lunch with her parents. So, in the morning, they had their last meeting, and she left. Ted went to the Diamond estate and gathered more information. He had seen Diamond and Kara at the pool many times. It seemed to be where they spent a lot of time. He found that the directional device worked fine, allowing him to overhear some of their conversations. He found them boring. By the third week, the twins were home. They noticed their parents were effectively separated. At dinner that Tuesday, Claire asked, "Mom, Dad, what's going on?" Kara said, "We have some problems. We'll deal with it. Don't worry." The girls then looked at Ted. He shook his head. "The truth is, your mother decided to have physical relations with her boss, so I moved into the guest house. What will happen long-term hasn't been decided." Kara was angry at Ted for putting it that way. However, there was nothing to object to. She said, "I felt that I needed—" Beth interrupted. "A new man. Looks like it. How could you, Mom?" Kara stood up and ran upstairs. "Are you getting divorced, Dad?" asked Claire. "I don't know. Nothing's decided yet. But can you keep your mouths shut?" The girls answered in unison. "Yes." "Do you promise?" "Yes. I have a new friend I'll introduce to you this weekend when Mom goes to her new boyfriend." The twins were smart. Claire said, "You mean you have someone you want us to meet? So this must be very serious, right?" "Maybe. I mean, until Mom left, I never would have met Nora, but Mom went and so did I. And who knows who will end up with whom?" Beth grinned. Claire asked, "How did you manage to work so quickly, Dad? This doesn't sound like you." "I kind of knew Nora from lunches. Maybe I felt insecure or like I didn't measure up. And it seemed to me that Nora would like to go on a date with me. She really wanted this." The girls fell into a thoughtful and uncomfortable silence. Ted let them think. Finally, he asked, "Anything else at the moment?" Claire asked, When? When will we meet her?" "I'll organize something for this weekend. You have a game on Saturday afternoon, right?" "Yes. Maybe Nora and I will come." "This is serious, Dad. You're not ashamed to appear with her in front of our friend's parents." Ted wasn't surprised the girls were so perceptive. He believed they could figure this out. "Nothing is set in stone now. I like this woman, and your mother ruined our marriage, but the situation is unpredictable." They left it at that. Kara never came downstairs. On Friday, she returned to Diamond's estate. She had a pleasant weekend, but sometimes got bored. Byron's physical repertoire was more limited than Ted's. Kara tried to introduce something new, but he wasn't receptive. Byron could manage at best 3 times a day, night, and he was quick and didn't like cuddling. This left a lot of time when they weren't having lovemaking. Since their affair was supposed to be secret, they couldn't go out. So they stayed at the estate. It was big enough for hiking, and they had a pool where they spent a lot of time. That same weekend, Ted took Nora dancing again, this time to a local club. One of her friends, Laura Blake, was there, and Ted was introduced to her. In reality, Ted had no intention of keeping his relationship with Nora a secret. They danced amazingly, then went back to Nora's. Ted left at 1 a.m. The twins were waiting for him. A wide smile appeared on Ted's face when he saw them in the living room. "You girls have a game tomorrow. You should get some sleep." Beth said, "We were waiting for you." Claire added, "I see you have a big smile. I bet you." Ted interrupted, "Never mind, go to sleep. Game at 10. Nora will come with us." Nora arrived at 8:30. She was nervous. Ted was nervous. The twins were nervous and insecure. When Ted opened the door and let Nora in, there was a long pause where no one said a word. Nora looked great. Finally, Ted said, "Nora, this is Claire and this is Beth." Nora smiled. "Hello. I think it's a little awkward, but maybe we have something in common. I played football in college, on the attack." "Where?" asked Beth. "Notre Dame," Nora said. Ted was stunned, and the girls were impressed. Beth, the troublemaker, had a soccer ball in her hands. She tossed it to Nora, who skillfully picked it up with her right foot and threw it back with her knee. Beth caught the ball. Nora smiled, and Beth and Claire smiled back. Ted said, then let's go." The girls were good at soccer. They usually dominated the center of the field, trying to control the game. Ted and Nora watched. Ted was watching closely, while Nora could hardly contain her excitement, jumping up and down in her seat. The other parents noticed her enthusiasm. The game was tense and exciting, with the other team taking a 2-goal lead, but the home team fought back and equalized. 2 minutes before the end, the opposing coach made a substitution. Beth stood next to Nora, who called her over and said, "They will try to pass by your side. Cut through and leave." Beth nodded, and Nora's analysis was accurate. Beth intercepted the pass and sped towards the goal. Ted jumped up, but Nora remained calm. Beth faked left, drew the goalie out, and kicked the ball into the net. The game ended immediately after this score. Ted and the girls celebrated with other parents. Nora stepped back, and when the celebration died down, Beth asked her, "How did you know?" Nora laughed. "I watched the game. I see the game when I watch." She patted Beth's hand. Several parents noticed the interaction. Joan Drake asked Ted, "Is she the Twins coach?" Ted replied, "No, she's my friend, but she played this game." The girls' coach, Lena Holmes, said, "Of course I remember her. She played for Notre Dame." On the attack, Ted called Nora over and introduced her to everyone. Nobody asked any awkward questions. In the car on the way home, Claire said, "Dad, you can guess what they're all wondering." Ted laughed. "Let them." The four of them stopped for pizza. Then Ted and Nora went to her house for about 3 hours. They returned with Chinese dinner. Ted was a bit worried about the food choice. After dinner, they had another long conversation about soccer. Beth Googled Nora and learned about her college career. Nora had studied there for 3 years. Around 9 p.m., there was an awkward silence. Then Ted said, "Girls, Nora and I are heading to the guest house." Beth said, "Be quiet, please." Nora laughed. "I promise to do my best." After Nora and Ted left, the girls discussed everything. They really liked Nora and saw how much their father liked her. They felt like their family life was over. It was an abrupt transition. Claire said, "It's not Dad's fault, is it? Mom left to study lovemaking with this idiot. I really hate her for this." "Me too." "I can only guess, but how could she just do that?" "Selfishness, that's all. We have to accept the change, Claire. Maybe things won't be so bad. I like Nora. Dad likes her too. But they haven't known each other long, right? So we don't know. Maybe Mom and Dad will make peace." "Maybe," Beth said dryly. They went upstairs, watched a video, and then fell asleep. Ted and Nora had a wonderful time again. In the morning, they prepared breakfast for 4. Nora set up an impromptu soccer lesson for the twins in the backyard. Then she had to visit her mom and dad. Ted and the twins had a long discussion about how to proceed. Ted tried to reassure them about their mother and told them that even if there was a divorce, they would stay in the house. He also assured them they would still have a lot of contact with both parents if they separated. They discussed how the girls should react to Kara, and Ted urged them to be polite. Then Kara appeared at the door, creating another awkward moment with everyone staring at her. Kara said, "I want you girls to know that I love you, and I love Dad too. This is true." Beth calmly replied, "Mom, that's what you say, but what you're doing says otherwise. I can't explain this to you. I just needed it. This won't last forever." Claire said, "Oh, I'm not so sure about this." Kara walked into the kitchen saying she was going to make dinner. The other 3 looked at each other. Nobody said much. Dinner was delicious, but stressful. Kara asked about the soccer game. Claire said, "Beth scored the winning goal. Tell her." After an awkward silence, Ted said, "Beth anticipated the pass and intercepted it. She went all the way and scored past the goalie." Kara praised the girls. Ted cleared the table and the girls went to their rooms. He went to the guest house. Kara said, "Ted, understand. I mean, you could spend the night here." "Never! Are you done with this idiot?" "I don't know. Maybe it wasn't what I hoped for. We stayed home all weekend." "You know, Kara, people will find out. They already know something is wrong. I don't want to embarrass you. And he doesn't want his wife to know." "It's a pity, Ted. A bit more, and it will end." "Kara, please understand. You ruined our marriage. It's over between us. So stay as long as you want. Just remember, he is all you have now." Kara was shocked by this frank statement. She sobbed once and ran upstairs. By morning, she decided to act normally. She had to go to work, and so did Ted. The girls were preparing for a trip to their grandparents' house, and then to an outdoor camp. Ted had lunch with Nora and explained what happened after she left. Then he went home to help the twins pack their things. Kara's plans for the day were disrupted when her friend Joan called. "Kara, who was that nice young woman who came to the football game with Ted?" Kara paused. "Which young woman?" "Oh, understand she's a former soccer player. Very pretty. We were all wondering where you were." "Damn it. Calm down, Kara. She and Ted didn't... There weren't any obvious signs, you know." "Oh, no? Well, they didn't tell me anything about her. What is her name?" "Nora." "Kara, where have you been? I heard something I can't believe." "Like what? Joan? Like the fact that you left Ted for your boss." "Not true. I didn't leave him." "Well, Jane Bright has a cousin at the club who works for Mr. Diamond in his house. The cousin said that on weekends when his wife is away, he has a woman there." "Crap. So it's you. God, Kara. God." "This shouldn't last too long, Joan. Only on weekends." "You're stupid. Ted already has another woman, and guess what? I don't blame him. She's younger and hottest. Your daughters seem to be already familiar with her. You've screwed up royally." Kara was truly shocked. That evening, she and Ted dropped the girls off at his parents' house. The ride home was silent, but when they entered the house, Kara confronted Ted and slapped him. He stepped back. "What the hell, you replaced me, you fool? You're complaining? What did you expect? You must have made preparations for my departure. How long have you been making fun of me?" "I only knew her from the cafe. We didn't even kiss until you went crazy with your boss. So screw you, cow." Kara stormed away. Ted went to the guest house, then walked out the back door. Wearing dark clothes, he found a good place to observe Diamond from a tree. That night, he intended to test a sound amplification device. He set it up and waited until he saw Diamond and his wife on the deck overlooking the pool. They sat and drank wine. As he joined their discussion, he heard Diamond say, "And it won't last long." "You have your boy toy," Miranda replied. "Only because you started it. This is like the 4th or 5th available girl." Diamond said, "I support your style, Mira. Don't ruin it." "Why are they always married? Do their husbands know?" "Yes, I force them to tell their husbands about it. I like it better this way. When we have social events at our company, I smile at all the idiots." "Someday, boy, you will cross the wrong person." "Nope. What will they do? They may divorce their wife, but they all have children, so they don't do it. They just accept it." "So what if they end up getting divorced?" "It's a pity. You're one of the biggest pricks in the world." "Ugh, a real idiot." "But I'm good in bed, right?" Miranda laughed. "What do you think? My Deshaun is better." "Ha, nonsense." Diamond laughed. The conversation trailed off. Ted got down and walked away. Until this moment, Ted had thought dealing with Diamond was unnecessary and risky. But now he had Nora. Kara and her antics made it possible. Maybe he thought he should thank Diamond, but the conversation he just overheard reignited his burning anger. The next day, he walked into Miles's office, and they talked. Nora spent the weekend with Ted and the girls. The couple slept in the guest house, but otherwise interacted with the twins almost like a family. After Saturday's game, there were more soccer lessons. Saturday night, Ted and Nora had a fantastic time in bed as usual. As they lay in bed, Nora asked, "What happens next, Ted? I mean, maybe it's weird to ask this, but are we exclusive?" Ted laughed. "You mean, do I sleep with my wife on the side?" Nora giggled. "Yes. I'm absolutely not going to do this. I'm a one-woman man. You can be that woman if you want. I feel like I'm ruining my marriage. You two have been together for so long. Not you. Once Kara went to her boss, I was done with her after a few hours. Very quickly, in fact. I felt it freeing, and I benefited. I'm happy with it." The next morning, they had another fun run and then went to prepare breakfast. Nora went to her parents' house a little early to help her mother with an unusual cake. Ted told the girls he was going for a bike ride with Miles and that he'd see them later. He hugged each one tightly and left. Earlier that week, Ted had prepared the rifle and left it by the tree, loaded and wrapped. As he hid his bike and headed there, he half hoped someone would take it, but everything was in place. He had serious doubts even when he was backed into a corner. But he kept remembering the conversation this prick had with his wife Miranda, and then he saw his almost undressed wife kissing the guy. He thought, screw this, it's time to end this crap. As Ted and Miles sat drinking beer after the bike ride, Robin ran out of the house. "I saw it on TV. Diamond was shot. He is dead. Diamond is dead." Ted quickly stood up. "What about Kara? They said that a woman was present, but she was not injured." Miles exclaimed, "Oh my God." He took out his phone and turned on the newsfeed. Miles kept Ted's cell phone with him the entire trip. It was in his belt bag. He waited until Robin looked at his phone before handing Ted the phone. But Robin saw it. She didn't think much of it at the time. Ted tried to call Kara. No answer. He said, "I better go home. Maybe someone called." He left on a bicycle. When he returned home, the landline phone was ringing. "Hello, is this Ted Vincent?" "Yes. This is Detective Harvey from APD. There was a shooting, but your wife was not injured." "You're talking about Diamond? My friend told me what happened." "I can't comment on this. Mr. Diamond is dead. Your wife is here at the station. She is completely shocked. Can you come get her?" "Certainly. Where?" "Main office, 3rd floor. Please contact the front desk." Ted put on shorts and a t-shirt over his cycling gear. He had a wallet and phone in his fanny pack. He grabbed the car keys and drove off, unsure of what to expect. He was told he could see Kara after the conversation. Detective Harvey, an older fit white guy with gray hair, had a partner, Stella Blaine, an attractive and tall brunette. Ted sat with them in a small room and answered all their questions. They asked about his day, and he recounted the bike ride and all. They then asked if he knew Kara was involved with Diamond. Yes. How did you feel about this? Asked Harvey. I didn't like it, but I moved on. What does that mean? I have another interest, another woman. Oh, so you have an open marriage? No. As soon as she announced it, that's how I reacted. Do you have a weapon? Yes, I have a weapon safe. We'll have to look into it. Fine. We'll go home together. The police gathered details about the bike ride, addresses, and who Ted met with. Then they left him in a small room for a while. The door was locked. Ted just sat there looking at his phone. About 15 minutes later, Harvey returned and asked if they could look at his phone. Ted said, I have work-related stuff on my phone that I don't want public, nothing illegal. We could get a warrant. He decided to let them take the phone. He was told it would take 30 minutes. Then they took him to Kara. She was wearing a t-shirt and jeans, not hers. She looked scared. Ted said, Kara, are you okay? No, God, he got shot. I was right there. There was blood everywhere. I'm sorry, Kara. Once they're done with my phone, I can take you home. Okay, Ted. Pause. Ted, I regret all of this, but we can talk on the way home. He hugged her. Soon the detective brought the phone and the couple left the station. When they were in the car, Kara asked, Ted, did you shoot him? No, maybe I don't regret that he was liquidated, but I didn't do it. Kara stared at him. I know you. You could have, but you found the right girl, so you didn't. Did you see him get shot? No. I heard a shot and it all exploded. Now she was crying. She was sobbing. Ted pulled the SUV into the driveway. He escorted Kara inside and led the arriving police officers to the weapon safe. They examined the weapon and asked about the ammunition. There was an unopened box of .30 caliber ammunition. They were not interested in other ammunition. When they got back outside, Harvey turned to Ted and said, We'll take DNA and fingerprints from the rifle we have. I would advise you not to interfere with this, Mr. Vincent. Well, I don't know about any weapons, and I didn't shoot anyone. Fine, see you. Ted went inside to deal with his wife. However, before doing this, he called Nora and told her what had happened. She knew some details. He asked if she would come over later, once Kara had calmed down. Then he called his parents and daughters. They discussed the events of the past day for a long time. One question was whether the twins would go to outdoor camp next week. It was decided that they should leave. To avoid any confusion, Kara took a long shower. Ted inquired about her mental state. Not surprisingly, she was distressed. He was waiting for her when she came out in a robe. It must be difficult. Have you cleaned up enough? She smiled. No, but the water ran out. Yes, I guessed. What can I do for you? Well, maybe we can order pizza. I'm starving. Ted did it. Kara looked at Ted over her pizza. I was thinking about you. I'm not so sure you're innocent. Where have you been today? On a bike ride with Miles, I told the cops. He might lie for you. Yeah, but he doesn't have to lie. I admit I have some anger issues at times, but I didn't shoot that idiot. He was an idiot. You were right about that. Are you going to divorce me? Maybe. I mean, you threw it in my face. Kara, after so many years, you needed some rich boy. I agree he was good looking. He was good. Honestly, Ted, he wasn't. He didn't really live up to his looks. Yeah, it's true. You have some kind of woman, Nora. I was told she's younger and more attractive. Yes, she is quite attractive and athletic. She played soccer in college. And she just picked you up right away? I bet you mastered it before I had Byron. No, maybe around the same time. First, we went dancing. Why? Are you interested? I probably won't have a job. You will leave me. I know I have to live, and we have a marriage contract. I won't let you starve, and maybe you'll have a job. Maybe. Miranda probably isn't too happy with me. Ted's phone rang. It was Nora. He walked into the living room. Kara followed him. From a distance, she heard their declarations of love. If she had been wearing shoes, she would have kicked herself. As Ted tried to persuade Nora not to come, Kara entered the room. Let her come, Ted. I think it's time for us to meet. 30 minutes later, the doorbell rang and Ted let Nora in. Kara was already dressed. She looked tired, but still attractive. The two women looked at each other for what must have been a full minute. Then Nora said, I'm sorry. You must be very shocked. Thank you. This is true. It's all so confusing. You took my husband. You left him. It is not my fault. They were about 10 feet apart. Ted positioned himself to intervene if necessary. Kara was shaking and started sobbing again. Nora stepped towards her and hugged her, letting Kara cry on her shoulder. Ted was amazed. Nora sat Kara down on the couch, maintaining contact. There was room for Ted too, so he sat next to Kara and hugged her as well. Kara sobbed, gasping for air. She sobbed, "Such a fool. Sorry, such a fool." Kara's crying subsided. She stood up a bit and asked Ted, "Do you think the hot water is ready?" "Maybe," and got up to take another shower. After she emptied the tank again, Ted gave her a pill, and she fell asleep on their bed. Ted and Nora went to the guest bedroom. They didn't want to leave Kara alone in the house. They watched the news. At 10, Diamond's homicide was widely reported. As it turned out, Diamond had many affairs with married women who mostly worked for him in one way or another, so Ted was far from the only suspect. Later on CNN, it turned out that some people also had business reasons for eliminating Diamond. Finally, there were suggestions online that Diamond's wife could be involved. Ted turned off all media. After 11, he and Nora went to bed. Neither of them really wanted to have lovemaking at first, but Nora was silent. Ted woke up early and checked on Kara. She slept until 9, then took a shower. At 10, all three were sitting at breakfast, eating pancakes that Nora had whipped up. Mozart started playing on Nora's phone. She answered, and it was the police to arrange an interview. Nora asked Kara and Ted, "Should I ask them to come here?" Kara nodded. "We can get the latest news." At 11, Detectives Harvey and Blaine came and took Nora to a private room to take a statement. This took about 25 minutes. Then they all met in the living room. Kara asked, "Any news about who did this?" Blaine said, "Not yet. Many people had a motive, including you, Mr. Vincent." "We've already discussed this," Ted frowned. "Yes, well, thank you all for your cooperation," Harvey said. They left. Robin called and said the police were coming to take a statement. They were polite but persistent and scrupulous. Ted told her he would see Miles at work. All three were somewhat confused, not knowing what to do. "Should I leave?" asked Nora. Kara said, "No, I understand Ted might want you to stay." Ted nodded. They all sat on the back patio drinking coffee. Kara's calm returned, but she seemed sad. Ted and Nora seemed to be expecting more problems. Kara held her temples. "I keep seeing him dead. He still didn't move. I wonder if I'll always see this." Nora seemed to want to console her. "In my course on the psychology of grief, they said that images are the most persistent thing, but over time they fade and are erased." "I really hope so," Kara's voice broke. "Do you have news from work?" Ted asked. "No. I worked directly for Byron. I acted as a sort of dealer for the goods sent to him. I let him see some things, but took care of other things myself. Whoever takes his place will need someone like me." "Who will it be?" asked Nora. "My only guess is Miranda. I know what was in his will because I signed it as a witness. She gets everything except some things for his mom." "Okay? Do you want to work there?" "Yes. Like I said, I need to support myself." "Huh." Ted looked at Nora. "Well, until you get back on your feet. Did you two sleep in the house last night?" "It's clear that this bothered Kara." Nora nodded. "In the guest room. I hope this continues for some time until I get back on my feet." There was a double meaning in Kara's words, and neither Ted nor Nora missed it. Ted didn't mind. Everything will work out on its own, and the girls will be back briefly next week. "Nora, they told me you went to their game," Kara remembered. "Yes, it was exciting. I missed it," Kara sobbed again. "I feel like such a fool. He had a whole string of women. He manipulated us all." "Well, he was a handsome prick. You made a big mistake." Nora tried to calm her down a little. "I think you've been unhappy for a while," Ted said. Here at home, not at work." Kara thought and said, "This is true. I don't know what caused it. Maybe something like, the grass is greener. Then a big hole opened up and swallowed my life." She stood up and ran inside. After a while, the clink of pots and pans was heard. Kara baked a chocolate cake that was ready by noon. Eventually, Nora and Ted came into the kitchen and began to watch, talking incoherently about something. They ate sandwiches while the cake cooled enough to frost it. So the day continued. Nora made burgers for dinner, and Kara made a salad. The three of them did something, but hardly talked about the future. Kara went to bed at 9 o'clock. Twice she woke up from nightmares, once screaming. Ted came in and calmed her down. The next morning, Tuesday, Nora had to go to work. Ted also wanted to go to the office, but he was worried about Kara. While he was thinking, Kara's phone rang. It was Miranda. Kara put her phone on speaker. "Will you come to work today?" "I have a job." "Yes, I understand the situation is difficult, but something has to be done, and you can't be replaced right away. So despite your stupidity about Byron, I need your help." Kara looked at Ted. He nodded. "I can be there in an hour." "Fine. Come to the house. Walk behind so you don't get caught. Kara met Miranda in the office on the second floor. Miranda extended her hand for a handshake, and Kara accepted it. Miranda began, "I'm curious, before we get down to business, why Byron was able to get his hands on you. I saw your husband. Did he disappoint you?" "Oh no, but Byron looked so good." "Yes, but that was not the case. Not that good, actually. I've already begun to understand this. Not bad, but no more. Best case scenario, he had a tendency to fade. Perhaps you and he have not reached this stage yet." "Maybe. Well, let's get started." The two of them worked all day, bringing Miranda up to date. They also considered how to handle Byron's affairs, but the body had not yet been returned. At 6 in the evening, Miranda looked up from her work and asked, "Can you stay for dinner? We still have a lot to do." "Certainly. I have Ted and his girlfriend at home." "That's what I heard. She's pretty." "Yes, and young. He slept with her the first night I left. So they are really connected." "Looks like it. My girls like her too." Miranda looked at Kara and smiled. "Well, if you need some relief, I can lend you one of my boy toys. They know how to satisfy a woman." Kara blushed. "Miranda, thank you, but I'm not ready yet. Just let me know. You know, now that we women are running the company, maybe the guys will have to make room." "Is there anything you need?" "Well, if it comes to that, a toy boy will do. I don't want to destroy any family." "You're too cute, Kara." They ate, and Kara went home. At 9:30, Miranda gave her a significant raise. Ted and Nora were interested to see how Kara was doing at work, given the complexity of the situation. Kara described her day and the work she had to do, and she told them about her promotion. "So I won't be a burden. Looks like I can support myself." It sounded pretty bleak. Ted said, I... Kara interrupted. "You know, Miranda offered me a boy toy to use if I needed it. I refused for now." Nora gasped. "Really? How do they look?" Ted was a little annoyed by this, but said nothing. "I don't know. I didn't even know Miranda had them." For the next 6 weeks, Kara worked for Miranda 6 days a week, either in the office or at her home. The work was moving forward. Ted started getting divorced about 2 weeks later. This came as no surprise to Kara or the twins. Miranda hired Kara a lawyer, but the details were easy to work out. The parties agreed and signed a few weeks later. The twins stayed in the house with Ted and Nora. Kara didn't mind that much. She gradually moved towards peaceful coexistence with her daughters. They often spent their days off with her. Ted and Nora returned to the main house. Nora gave up her apartment. Essentially, she took on the role of mother to the girls. The situation became more and more comfortable. One night, Nora and Ted, having completed another pleasant session of lovemaking, snuggled up to each other. "Nora, do you want to get married?" Nora tensed. She looked at him. "Yes." They kissed. Nora said, "I want children too." She looked at Ted with some trepidation. He hugged Nora. Redipping into diaper changing. Okay." They kissed again. They got married 6 months later. 2 months later, Nora became pregnant. Meanwhile, the police investigation into the sensational homicide of a millionaire reached a dead end. Gradually, the crime disappeared from public view. From time to time, some journalists raised this topic, and it faded again. Authorities spent a lot of time checking the alibis of everyone they thought had a motive, including the 6 husbands. They got nowhere. Some had no alibis or weak ones, but the police did not have the results of an examination of the prints on the rifle and indeed no concrete evidence, and there were no witnesses, despite numerous public appeals to people who may have been on a side trail near the shooting site. The police checked Miranda. She was with 2 young men several miles from the shooting scene. They checked to see if she had ordered the shot. Even though the shooting did not appear to be professionally executed, nothing was found, perhaps because there was nothing to look for. Their attention to Ted quickly faded. Miles had a very convincing alibi as a traveling salesman. In the end, the matter went into dormant mode, slightly reminding itself from time to time. Soon, Kara became absolutely indispensable to Miranda and the company. She was smart, passionate, and knew more about operations than anyone else, with the possible exception of the late Byron. One Saturday afternoon, Miranda and Kara were getting ready to go out. Kara had a room in the house. She went upstairs to take a shower. Until now, she had never gone to the pool. Miranda had no problems with the pool. It bothered Miranda that Kara had an issue with the pool. So that Saturday, Miranda found Kara drying herself with a towel after her shower and tossed her a robe. "Come with me," Miranda said. Kara was confused, but Miranda was the boss. She followed her. Miranda walked to the door that led outside to the pool. Kara stopped. Miranda said harshly, "I have a treat for you, but you have to go outside to get it." Kara hesitated, but then she thought maybe it was time to step outside. There were 2 sun loungers by the pool. Miranda walked past them, and Kara followed. There were 2 young men there, both undressed, both beautiful and well-endowed. One was black, the other white, but well-tanned. Kara was stunned. Miranda said, "You haven't slept since the shooting happened. This is Damon, and this is Chad. You have a choice, but you must choose one." Kara stood there looking at the men. She got excited, opened her robe, and threw it on the floor. She slowly walked towards Damon, staring at him. "Hello, Damon. My name is Kara." Damon smiled. "Nice to meet you, Kara." Kara and Damon put on quite a show for Miranda and Chad, who were just watching. Miranda and Chad gave them a round of applause. And that's how Kara's fear of the pool was overcome. Kara's life changed dramatically, but not in a bad way. She had her choice of boy toys and a job she loved. She spent Sundays with her daughters and sometimes with Ted and Nora. When Nora gave birth to little Bryce, Kara was thrilled, but a little jealous. Ted and Nora were very happy too. One day, when the women were alone, Nora asked Kara about her bed life, and Kara told her. Clearly, Nora's lovemaking with Ted was exciting that night. This had subsided a bit since the baby was born. Now Nora was back into the rhythm. From time to time, Nora and Kara would start another conversation. This was always enough. Kara thought of it as a family ministry that she was happy to do, some compensation to Ted for her blunder. Soon, baby Nikki appeared. As they say, all's well that ends well. One evening, after all the children had gone to bed, Robin found herself walking around the backyard with Ted. She stopped at the guest house and turned to him. "Nora and I like each other," she said. "I'm pleased," Ted smiled. "You know, back then you could have had me. But I chose Miles. Do you know why? I could never understand you. You have inner anger. Maybe from your parents. You're hiding it, but it's always been there. And I still love you." "Maybe so. Maybe. I rarely think about it." "I think sometimes. And yet you have created a good life for yourself and your loved ones, and for Miles, and me too." "But Ted, I saw Miles handing you your phone after your bike ride." "I saw. I didn't immediately realize what this meant. You took a hell of a risk, and so did Miles. One damn chance." Ted was silent for a moment, looking at Robin. "Do you think I should get some counseling?" Robin smiled. "Do not do that. It's you. So it was and will be. And remember, Miles and I still love you." The weeks passed. The police investigation was at a standstill, and the diamond case was slowly being forgotten by the public. Ted and Nora continued their life together, happy with their growing family. Kara remained an integral part of the business and found her own happiness, albeit in an unconventional way. The twins adapted well to the changes, supported by the loving presence of both their parents. In the end, life moved on for all involved. They each found their way, forging new paths and finding solace in the present, leaving the past behind. In this complex web of relationships and emotions, they discovered a new kind of harmony, one that allowed them all to coexist and thrive.
How dare you live in luxury on my sin? Fortune, you mere daughter-in-law, leave. You're a nuisance. Even seeing you is annoying. In the middle of an argument with my husband, my mother-in-law, changing her complexion suddenly, made these incomprehensible remarks. Remarks at my mother-in-law. What happened? You think I don't know anything, but I have heard everything from Jack. I'm aware that you're squandering Jack's fortune and accumulating debts. He doesn't need a wife who just squanders money around. Leave right now. I had decided to endure my mother-in-law's harassment to continue my married life, but I was shocked by my husband's betrayal. There's no reason to support them anymore. They simply don't know gratitude. I understand. I'll leave. I thought it was pitiful, but decided to leave as they wished. My name is Alice. I'm 29 years old and a remote worker. I've always been frail. My mother raised me single-handedly, and she's 65 this year. She's always been concerned about me. Even if you're not strong, there will come a time when you must earn a living. I can't always protect you, Catherine, so you need to learn the skills to survive. Yes, I understand. I'll do my best. I've lived supported by my mother for a long time, but after dropping out of high school, I've been self-learning and earning a living from remote work. Even on days I feel tired, working at my own pace was ideal for me. Initially, I only made about $300 a month, but gradually my income increased. I was seen as a shut-in at home after leaving high school, but I believe I'm on the path I chose. A few years after I started working, my income far exceeded the average for my age group, and I was no longer swayed by others' words. Your work seems to be going well. I'm so happy now. I can feel at ease. When my job stabilized, my mother showed relief and joy as if it was her own achievement. At that time, my mother, who had been working in a supermarket deli section, was assigned a leadership role, and she was physically and mentally exhausted. "Mom, how long do you plan to keep working?" "We can live on my income alone, so why not quit and live a relaxed life?" Seeing my mother in pain every day, I couldn't keep silent. She never imagined that I, frail as I was, would become her support. Touched by my suggestion, my mother thanked me repeatedly, shedding tears. Eventually, my mother quit her supermarket job at the right time and began living a more relaxed life. She sometimes helped with my remote work, but she mostly enjoyed a peaceful retirement. She went on trips with friends, enjoyed luxury lunches, etc. Unlike her time at the supermarket, she regained her former energy and spent her days cheerfully. No matter how busy I was, I always had dinner with my mother and talked about the day's events. I had lunch with a friend today. Her daughter got married. She's excited to see her grandchild. "Catherine, you're busy with work, so maybe there's no chance for a relationship right now, but I hope you'll find someone wonderful." Eventually, hearing this, I responded with a slightly troubled expression. "Marriage, huh? I've never seriously thought about it, but it's something to aspire to, isn't it?" That was a conversation I had with my mother. To be honest, I never seriously considered marriage. I have often fallen ill since I was young. During elementary and middle school, I was in and out of the hospital, and I had to drop out of high school due to poor health. With such a background, I had no friends to call my own, let alone conversations with the opposite sex. However, as my mother said, maybe marriage and having children wouldn't be so bad if there was the right connection. I began to hope for that. There was a moment when I felt that this wish might come true. One day, I took the morning off for the first time in a while and went to the shopping mall alone. Then, a salesperson at the jewelry store approached me. "Are you looking for a gift?" "I'd be happy to help." "Yes, thank you. Actually, I'm thinking of a necklace for my mother's birthday. Do you have any recommendations?" This was my first encounter with Jack, who would later become my spouse. "A gift for your mother? That's wonderful. Shall I show you some recommendations? Do you have a budget in mind?" "I haven't set a specific budget. If I find something appropriate, I plan to buy it. Please show me your recommended jewelry." When I visited the jewelry store for my mother's birthday, I unexpectedly hit it off with Jack. We chatted while looking at products and somehow ended up exchanging contact information. It was an unusual development for an employee and a customer, but we were naturally drawn to each other. Of course, I chose a very expensive item recommended by Jack for my mother's birthday. But what was more captivating was the exhilarating encounter with Jack. After that, we kept in touch amidst our busy lives and occasionally went on dates. We quickly started a relationship, and things progressed smoothly until we eventually started discussing marriage. My mother seemed to sense that I had a new partner, and when I told her, "Mom, I'm thinking of marrying someone," she was delighted, not surprised. "I thought you've been looking more lively lately, so you've got a boyfriend. It's wonderful that you're thinking of marriage. I'd love to meet him." For me, nearing 30, the idea of marrying in my 20s was like a dream, something I hadn't even considered until recently. My mother seemed to feel the same. Later, when I introduced Jack to my mother, we learned that he too was raised in a single-mother household. "I will definitely make Catherine happy. Please allow me to marry her." Receiving such a confident greeting, Both my mother and I couldn't hide our smiles. For my mother, my marriage was unexpected, but she was happy that I had brought someone trustworthy. Our dating period wasn't very long, but it was about destiny and timing. My mother understood that well and was genuinely happy for our marriage. After that, I went to greet Jack's family. Little did I know that this would greatly change my life. Jack, like me, lived at his mother's house. When I arrived at Jack's house, located in a quiet residential area, his mother looked at me up and down and said, "I heard Jack wanted to get married, so I wondered what kind of person you'd be. But you're quite plain. I was expecting someone flashy and assertive, so it's a surprise." "Mom, that's a bit much." "It's rude to say that to someone who you're meeting for the first time," I said, trying to maintain composure. My first impression of my mother-in-law was the worst. I couldn't understand what she was thinking, and her eyes, laughing creepily while looking at me, were extremely uncomfortable. It seemed like Jack was trying to stand up for me, but he also appeared to be careful not to upset his mother. "Nice to meet you. I'm Alice. I've been dating Jack with the prospect of marriage in mind." "Oh, I've already heard about that from Jack. Your name, age, job, and even the fact that you come from a single mother family." She interrupted me and looked at me with sarcasm. An unpleasant person. That description fit her perfectly. Then she said, "I have no objections to the marriage, but Jack and I plan to live together. Also, we're considering buying a new apartment. Once you both get married, let's live there, all three of us. If you can't accept this, then maybe marriage is out of the question." I hadn't heard about this. It seemed Jack and his mother had planned this all along, choosing a residence for the three of us to live in after marriage. They handed me a brochure for the apartment they planned to buy. It was a very luxurious four-room high-rise condo. "This is an incredibly luxurious condo, so the three of us will live here. In this high-rise condo, yeah, didn't I mention it? I can't be separated from Mom even after marriage. I worry about her, so if you decide to marry me, living with my mom is unavoidable. You understand, right?" I felt uneasy seeing Jack's expression at that time, but my mind was in turmoil, and I couldn't think straight. Afterwards, Jack was as kind as ever to me. I found myself believing in his kindness. In hindsight, I should have said, "I need some time to think." But when I returned home, my mother was so happy about my marriage that I couldn't bring myself to delay the conversation. As a result, the marriage life plan by Jack and his mother began. Fortunately, the new high-rise condo was very close to my mother's house. If there were any problems, I could quickly visit my mother, and she could come to my apartment. There was that advantage. If there were any problems, I could quickly visit my mother, and she could come to my apartment. There was that advantage. However, I couldn't achieve the life I desired. As soon as we started living together, my mother-in-law declared, "Alice, you understand, right? From now on, you'll be taking care of my daily needs, cleaning, laundry, and, of course, preparing meals perfectly. I'm counting on you." I expected to be trusted with everything, but my mother-in-law began to behave abnormally, monitoring my every move. I was forbidden to contact my mother, and she was not allowed to visit our house. The most shocking thing was that I had to bear all the household expenses. Do you realize who you have to thank for living in this luxurious apartment? From now on, never forget your gratitude to us. What? What did you just say? My mother-in-law seemed to have no recognition of the fact that I was supporting the household, believing that her son was the provider. "You might be satisfied with the small amount of money you earn on your computer, but for us, that's worthless. What good is that petty cash?" I was shocked by her harsh words, realizing she didn't understand the actual financial situation. I thought about showing her the household accounts, but decided to talk to my husband first. "Why doesn't your mother know that I'm supporting the household? She criticizes me every day, saying I'm living off her, and she seems to underestimate my earnings. What's going on? Ahaha, are you bothered by that? It doesn't matter what Mom thinks." Actually, the credit for getting this condo is partly mine, so it's natural for her to think that way. My husband said this with full confidence. Since getting married, he hasn't contributed financially at all. I've been paying for all the furniture and appliances. Despite this, he just laughed it off, offered no help to me in distress, and changed the subject. This was unbelievable coming from the kind person he used to be. Because of this, my trust in my husband wavered, and my resentment towards my mother-in-law grew day by day. One day, he came home excited about purchasing a new luxury car on loan. I bought a luxury car suitable for this condo. It's on loan, but it's better than a compact car, right? Cool, isn't it? Since moving to the condo, my husband's lifestyle completely changed. He never seemed materialistic before, but he started buying tailor-made suits, luxury shoes, expensive watches and wallets, and now a new car, all without consulting me. Don't you think this is a bit too much? Are you sure about the payments? I can't take on any more expenses since we moved. Not a single penny. Just as I was about to finish my sentence, he shut me up. What are you thinking? Who do you think you are? Remember who you have to thank for getting married. If I hadn't approached you, you'd still be at your mom's house doing remote work. I was dumbfounded. I couldn't believe he would say such a thing. I couldn't take it anymore and objected to his words. Stop joking. Who do you think should be grateful? Making high-cost purchases without any consultation is insane. Enough is enough. What? Don't talk back to me. Don't mess with me. The situation was on the verge of turning into a physical altercation. At that moment, my mother-in-law, noticing our fight, appeared. What's this, Alice? Such a hot-headed attitude. I've been listening, and I've had enough. Spending so lavishly, using my son's money. Just get out. You're a nuisance. My mother-in-law didn't listen to me at all, blaming me as if I was entirely at fault. I was just stunned by her sudden and nonsensical accusations. What, mother-in-law? What are you talking about? You think I don't know? I've heard everything from Jack. I know all about you squandering his money and even getting into debt. We don't need an economic parasite. Just leave. I had planned to endure my mother-in-law's harassment to continue my married life, but my husband's betrayal was beyond my imagination. In reality, I wasn't living lavishly or in debt. The ones wasting money were these two ungrateful, is the word for them. My husband, affirming his mother's words, said with a laugh, "What will you do, huh? Apologize or leave? If you leave, I won't stop you, but remember it means divorce. Understood. I'll leave. I don't need the furniture and appliances I paid for. I'll leave them here." I wanted to throw their words back in their faces. After all, thanks to me, they were living in a 4-room condo. Yes, I'll file for divorce online now. Can you sign it quickly? I'll take the responsibility to submit it to the office. Saying that, I started searching online. My mother-in-law, watching me, seemed delighted, happy about me leaving the high-rise condo. Whether it was a lack of imagination or understanding about how life would unfold after this, perhaps she has a low IQ. But I wasn't interested in their future. I took the completed divorce papers, quickly packed my things, and arranged to leave the house. My mother-in-law continued her sarcastic remarks until the end. Beside her, my husband was rejoicing while wearing a similar expression. I'll submit the divorce papers. There will be no alimony or division of property. Here's the document. Just sign here. Yeah, I'll sign it. I was worried you might claim this apartment. Turns out I was worrying for nothing. As I quietly left, thinking I had no interest in this apartment, I emptied all my bank accounts. I might be criticized, but I was confident to face any condemnation. After all, every penny in those accounts was earned by my hard work over the years. Returning to my mother's house, she greeted me with a surprised expression. "I've been worried. I called several times but couldn't get through. I even went to your condo, but they wouldn't let me in. Are you okay?" "What a call? What do you mean?" Surprised by my mother's words, I carefully checked my phone and found that her number was set to reject incoming calls. Calls? I couldn't believe it. To think they went that far to prevent me from contacting my mother. I explained everything that had happened since I moved out to my mother without hiding any details. Isn't that just too terrible? Unbelievable. Even my usually gentle mother showed anger at this situation. But without me, they can't continue living in that high-rise condo. It's fine to just leave them be. The next day, I went to the office, submitted the divorce papers, and the divorce was finalized without any issues. What a short-lived marriage it was. Returning to my mother's house stabilized my mind, and I was able to concentrate on my work again, securing a stable income. At the end of the month, as expected, I received a call on my phone. Of course, it was from that foolish pair. "Hello, Alice, it's me, Jack. I'm in a bit of a bind and need your help." "What? I'm busy right now. I don't have time to deal with your issues." Hearing my ex-husband's voice, I immediately knew it was about money. They were probably struggling with various expenses. We're struggling with the condo's mortgage and utility bills. I had to sell the new car and pawn my branded watch, but it's still not enough. So please help me out. I'm begging you. As expected, they were behind on the condo's payments and couldn't even afford the utility bills. From what I heard, their situation seemed quite dire. Oh, that's unfortunate. If we were still married, I might have felt obligated to help, but we're divorced now. I'm not generous enough to lend money to a stranger. Sorry to hear that. I know, but you're the only one I can turn to now. Please help me out. His mother was probably there too, yelling in the background. Turn to someone. Isn't she right behind you? You can ask your dear mother for help. As I said this, my mother-in-law, unable to hold back, took the phone. What's with you, Alice? Being so cold? Were your former family in trouble? Can't you help? Our accounts are all zero. You gain nothing by holding a grudge against us. You're the lowest. What are you talking about? That was my money. You, who kicked me out of the house, have no right to talk about helping family members. If you keep this up, I'll bill you for all the living expenses. Okay, originally intending to stay calm, I got irritated and ended up threatening to charge them for all the living expenses I had paid for them. Surprisingly, my words hit them hard. Wait, please don't do that. We're just in financial trouble and seeking help. Yeah, please don't burden us any further. We promise not to bother you again, Alice. Is that okay? They excused themselves and made absurd. With a determined stance, I decided to put an end to this hassle. I'll let it go this time, but if you contact me again, I'll bill you for all the past living expenses. Okay, understood. Sorry, we won't bother you anymore. We won't contact you either. Okay. Although I didn't quite understand, I managed to clearly cut ties without being persistently bothered. I thought they would chase me more stubbornly, but they were really in financial trouble. After that, I blocked their numbers. I was relieved that they wouldn't contact me again. But one day, my mother told me she saw them packing and leaving the high-rise condo. They looked miserable, not at all like residents of a high-rise condo. Apparently, they couldn't afford to keep living there due to the mortgage and utility bills. It seems they're still struggling with debt repayment, as the house has not yet been sold. A true case of getting their just desserts. My ex-husband worked at a jewelry shop, but in reality, he wasn't earning much. He finally realized that obtaining the high-rise condo and living our life there was all thanks to me, but it's too late for him to realize that now. I want to start fresh, focusing on spending peaceful times with my mother. I'm currently living comfortably in my childhood home, but I'm planning to find a new house to live in with my mother. As part of honoring my mother, I'm considering moving into a barrier-free luxury home. I'll be patient in finding a home that suits us both. Alice, you've always excelled in your job. Keep up the great work. I'm here to back you up. Encouraged by my mother's kind words, I'm resolved to work diligently for her sake from this point forward.